Start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Was it more here? Higher one, actually. No.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for joining us.
Amplify it a little bit.
To start with, do we have any comments from the public for items not on the agenda? Yes, sir.
My name's Al Margulies. I've met a number of you. I've got 3 kids in the system, and I think this is my 9th year in the South Burlington schools. And I'm here tonight to talk about the no homework thing. I'm pretty unpopular, actually, with my view on this, but, you know, everybody talks about, I've got a 4th grader who talks about, hey, it's time to instill, personal responsibility, something you want to be working on. These kids should be reading 30 minutes a night. Reading comprehension and writing is important. The teachers will encourage us to get online to do math fact games and these sorts of things. This stuff used to be seamlessly integrated into the curriculum here, and now it's not. Now it's sort of fallen onto the parents to have to do this stuff. And I guess my question to you guys is, this is the biggest curriculum change we've had in my 9 years in the district. And I'm wondering, what are we looking at in the short and medium term to measure the impact, positive or negative, on the program? And then secondly, we've kind of removed a plank from the offering, and what are we replacing that with to improve the educational program? So that's kind of, those are the thoughts that are in my mind on this one, and
okay.
Whether answered now or if it's taken later, but just.
Great, thank you. David, do you want to have a short response? That may require more conversation, but would you like to respond right away?
Yeah, I think, what Al's bringing up is an important thing that I want people to know we're really aware of. And we are going to be looking at the metrics and looking at what we should be doing, not only as an Orchard school, but what about the other 2 schools. So we're spending time on it currently. And, the other 2 administrators, along with Mark, and our district staff are going to be looking at it. And we understand that there's kind of a mixed message here. Kind of the very quick side of it is Mark is seeing a much more engaged group of students in the daytime, and parents are expressing, again, this is anecdotal, not 100% conclusive, but are also expressing more of a joy of reading and family-related opportunities as opposed to stress. But we're going to look at it. And I think what Al brings up are good points. So we'll talk about it more.
Thanks, Alan. We'll come back on this down the road here, too. Thank you. Have we another comment over here?
Just to follow up to, I don't know if you're a teacher or whatever, but my daughter last night, she's a sophomore at the high school, she did 5.5 hours worth of homework last night. So we as parents would love to see the homework thing up also. That's 5.5 hours of homework to 11:15. So anyways, my name's David Duell. I've been in the city. I'm in my 53rd year. I'm a product of the school system. My kids are a product of the school system. One's in the Navy, one's a sophomore. My daughter came home from school yesterday and today, and she's like, Dad, I really don't want to go to school tomorrow. And I'm like, mate, we've been talking about this and all these other issues that you come and you tell me about, and I follow up with the kids. I don't follow up with the parents or the administrators because I'm pro-kid. And she's frustrated with, she feels that the teachers are detached from the kids at the high school. I can go back to a number of events that she's told me about that have led up to teachers at homecoming telling the parent advisor that kids can't, the boys on the float can't wear girls' clothing or cross-dress, to the inability to use a cowbell at a football game. I forget your name, but I can remember when we were in high school together, cowbells were pretty popular. But she's just feeling, along with other kids, that it's more of a harp on the kids and police them than let them learn and make mistakes. Whether it's in the classroom, on the athletic fields in her rowing club that she is so frustrated with that, I mean, I've called all the way to England today. I've called Hurricane Island Outward Bound and everything about these pulling boats that they use for the rowing club. There is, as the Maritime Museum said to me, Nick said, there is no way those boats could flip on Lake Champlain. There's not a big enough wave. So I'm just here to really think that the board needs to, and the administrators really need to start talking to the kids as kids and young adults. I raised a lot of heck here when I was in school here, and I made a lot of mistakes, but I sure did learn from them. I'm holding my head up high here for my 53rd year in South Burlington, and I think that Julie and the board needs to start maybe reaching out to some of the kids that aren't the straight A kids, some of the normal kids, the ones that are going to have a vocational education or a community college education, and listen to them what's going on. I mean, I'm at a football game and a kid puts his foot out in the aisle and a teacher comes up the stands and says, "You can't do that." What are we teaching these kids? It's a football game. A cowbell, yay, let's go Rebels. It's been going on since the school was built. Now to be at a football game, you're there cheering. It's not a place that I'm going to talk to Mrs. Nowak about community events with the school board, the city council, or anything. I'm there to cheer on the team. And it just seems I'm observing tactics that have made my father roll over in his grave. And Bob Yaden and Bob LaBerge, the people who have really built this community back when it was in its infancy. So I think that, you know, my daughter wanted to come tonight, but she has so much homework. But she said, you can tell that woman you talked to today, she's more than welcome to come to the school and talk to me. I would be very forward with her, meaning Julie, after we had a conversation today on the phone. So I'm really seeing as a taxpayer, parent, and community member that we're not really letting our kids make mistakes. We're more protecting them from falling down the stairs as a mistake, to learn from them. So I just wanted to let you know that how one kid and a few of them are feeling, that they're feeling you're detached. So I think that as a community member and a taxpayer, we need to really grasp the kids and start talking to them.
Thank you, David, for sharing that. I appreciate that. And if you haven't done so already, I would encourage you to see if you can find an appointment with David to talk about that in more detail.
We talked today, and one statement that Dr. Young made was that he felt that people needed to be able to have a civil conversation while at a football game. You know, be able to talk to Mrs. Nowak. But, I mean, I'm there to cheer. I'm there with my cowbell. I'm there to cheer on the Rebels. Granted, they didn't have a great football season, but there's always next year. So, you know, I just think when you're there at an athletic event, you're there to cheer on the team. I mean, if you want to have a civil conversation, Mrs. Nowak, let's go down to the concession stand and talk for a few minutes. The kids need to be able to cheer. They need to be able to yell and get that energy out. That's why they're kids. Remember when you were all kids? Remember Burlington High School when you were a kid and you were cheering on the Seahorses?
Against the South Burlington group, yes, I do,
and South
David.
Burlington was, I really, you know.
I mean, cheering has always been an important part.
And the kids would be
and they
comfortable
are
to
doing
talk with
that.
you all. They do have a comfort
cheering.
level.
Yep.
So, I mean, you are the folks who oversee the district. And as a parent, I'm kind of reaching out to, you know, I mean, Maeve was more than, she said, you know, I'd be more than happy to talk to the woman you talked to on the phone today. So, the kids talk to their parents. Some parents aren't willing to come and speak up, but when my daughter comes home and she says she doesn't want to go to school, I mean, I find that to be an issue. I mean, this is our community. This is their community too. This is where we want them to stay, live, raise their kids, get married, do everything, go to college, and stay here in the greatest city in the world. So please reach out to them, please.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
Any other comments? All right. Any amendments to the agenda?
If I could add one, I don't think we had it on the agenda to talk about the exit poll survey questions.
You had reminded me,
And I'm
but you're right.
remembering to remind
You're reminding me. No, yep. let's put that on right after 6. Is that acceptable?
After city school stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. Any other amendments to the agenda? All right. Student representative. Isaiah, how are you?
Good.
Good.
So looks like upcoming district dates are November 21st and 22nd, and November 23rd and 25th. And the 5th annual George Cannon 5K walk is Saturday, this Saturday, I think. And registration begins at 9 a.m. at South Burlington High School, and the walk begins at 9:30. Registration will also be available during lunches in the high school lobby this week. And everyone is asked to wear green or a superhero costume, and the best costume will receive a prize. Also, the annual harvest lunch will be held on the following dates. Here at Orchard, Wednesday, November 9th. Chamberlain School, Thursday, November 10th. Rick Marcotte Central, Thursday, November 10th. FHTMS, Friday, November 11th. And SBHS, Friday, November 11th.
Thank you, Isaiah. Any other announcements from other board members?
Championship field hockey game Saturday as well.
Very nice. All right. City and school collaboration. The next meeting that I have with Helen and Kevin and David is the 4th. We had to reschedule the last one. So not much to report on that front. That would bring us to the survey or the poll at the ballots. Already there.
Julie and I worked with Vince Bolduc on some questions that might be included in the exit poll survey, and had an opportunity to kind of get feedback individually from board members.
We're having a difficult time hearing.
Oh, sorry. You know what? Is this on?
That does work, yeah. You just got to bring a little.
Is that working?
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to be careful. Bridget and I are sharing it, so. Julie and I had a chance to work with Vince Bolduc on the exit poll survey. That's better, I can hear myself. And we had some discussion about which questions to ask in terms of whether the school board wanted to solicit any feedback on November 8th. So we did add some questions. Now it's got a lot of feedback. We did ask some questions on that were part of the city survey in terms of maintaining quality schools around resident priorities, things like that. But we have added 3 specific questions that look at, they will be geared at parents with children currently in the school system. And Vince helped us craft the questions so that we could get data that would be useful potentially. We don't know what the data will come back as. But the questions really focus around extracurricular activities that parents and guardians support for their students now, and the amount of time that parents are spending volunteering in the school system. So we've asked them to look back at the prior, I think 30 days in their experience and give an idea of how many activities their student may be involved in outside of school, about what kind of investment they're making separately as parents and guardians to augment their child's experiences, and what their availability has been to volunteer during the school day. So some of this information or some of the nature of the questions was garnered from workshops that we attended at the Vermont School Boards Association meeting, which was held in October. And there was the entire theme of the session and the conference was on equity in our public education system. So these were some of the places that information indicated there were potential areas of inequity with student experiences in general. So these were areas that typically these data don't exist within the school system. So we thought they would be areas that might augment our conversations around equity across our schools. And we may or may not get good information. We don't know, but we're really taking advantage of the opportunity that Vince presented us with to have one of his classes ask these questions as voters exit the polls.
Can I just add something?
Absolutely.
So I've also been in contact with Mr. Boldu, and I have like a dozen volunteers at the high school who are going to be involved in the polling, the exit polling.
Great.
So, some high
Good to
school
hear.
volunteers.
Nice.
That's good.
Can I just ask for clarification, when you ask for extracurricular, are you implying academic, or like does the soccer team count as that, or is there a way if you're hoping to learn about equity, I'm assuming it's in regards to education, or?
We asked, with Vince's feedback, the question is being asked really for non-school sponsored activities. So it could include it could include academic, it could include other sports activities, it might include drama, dance, whatever.
Daycare, rec department.
I don't think daycare is an extracurricular activity.
But is the question, some people that go to Twin Oaks have a lot of, they don't need to pay for soccer because they're paying for Twin Oaks and getting free swimming. I would be very careful with, maybe that's a very broad question and just how you choose to interpret it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't remember the exact wording, Monica, on the question, but there are 3 questions related to those extracurricular activities that are not school-sponsored. So, the bottom line is we haven't had an opportunity to kind of screen for a population and ask that kind of information. So we thought, based on the topics that were covered in this workshop, that it would be augmenting information. Again, it's in a vacuum, so we don't know what to expect.
Just suggesting maybe put a definition so when people are about to answer the question, they know what that means.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember what Vince did.
I can't either.
Abbott?
I like the concept of asking those questions. One of the things that sort of jumped to mind, though, was if your target population are families of school-age kids, is going to a poll the best place to get that, or is going to the schools where we sort of have that list? You might have a better, you do have a better sort of chance of getting your target population if you go directly to the parents in the schools versus hoping to see someone who looks like a parent at an exit poll. So I think it's valuable information to get, but if the goal really is to ask what kind of extracurricular activities are parents implementing at the schools, perhaps asking the parents in the schools is going to be a better idea.
Yeah, and I think working with Vince, 85%, 90% of this survey is focused to city-related issues. So he's not trying, or the team is not trying to screen for parents necessarily, but these questions will ask, do you have a child or more than one child in the school system right now? And then they'll go on to ask the 3 questions. My guess is, if the information may support doing a more in-depth study with, directly with the schools, for instance. But again, it was a very opportunistic approach for information that typically hasn't been available.
I understand. Now I get it.
Any other questions or comments on that topic? All right, we'll move to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Pat. So the first thing is, on my report, I've got a couple items here. Progress report related to the rebel name, and then a budget timeline. And I also wanted to just add in Election Day, just update, just so we're square on some of those things going on. So for the board, I did provide in the packet, obviously, is information about progress report specific to the rebel name, and also in your questions that I had some additional questions that came out. So by your place, also emailed to you were some additions to that. So I'd be happy to take any questions. I think first and foremost, the things that were identified back in October 5th of 15, specifically the specified action steps, we have not been able to totally satisfy those, although, so that I just want to be clear about that. In part, the high school leadership team has been broken up a bit, and certainly Patrick Burke is an instrumental player currently to that work. not the only one, but an important component. He started that work, and in addition, we've also done a considerable amount of other foundational work under diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I've tried to spell this out for folks. And again, I feel like we're in a good place. That said, we currently remain committed to our work around the discussion and topic of the rebel name. So I don't know what questions you might have regarding that.
We have questions from the board at this point?
I'd just like to have clarification that some of the actions for what I will call rebranding the Rebels name that were mentioned in the October 5th letter, that there will be some commitment that we will be looking at those once we go over the issues we have at the high school with the leadership there.
Yes, we are, Martin. We still stand committed to that conversation and want to see that does get addressed. Again, back in October 5th when we put those recommendations, and then you all responded to your decision around that. Some things currently have changed along the way, more information for us, more learning for us. But we do think that by providing the foundation not only to our staff and our students, we think we're going to be more ready to have that more in-depth conversation. And again, Isaiah, he may have some thoughts on that as well. I don't know, not to put you on the spot.
Well, I mean, I'm really glad to see the Student Diversity Union included in this update, but I'm not quite sure if that can be considered efforts made by the school to address the issue. That's a group that myself and my peer started at the school, and it came from us as students, and it wasn't necessarily a school effort. We have a lot of support in the school, which is really awesome, but I think that's more of like our effort just to build understanding and address discrimination and that sort of thing. But the rebel name isn't the only thing that we focused on, and I think I'd like to see more from the school.
Thank you, Isaiah.
And could you expand a little bit on the Diversity Union, kind of like, how big is that group and some of the things they're doing? Just, I think it'd be good for us and the community to hear a little more about that.
Yeah, so we've been meeting since December of last year, and the group has grown really nicely over the course of the last year. I think we have now over 25 students in it, which is really great. So we get together twice a month and talk about race, racial identity, racism. It's a really open discussion group, and any students are welcome to come and just voice opinions on these issues and stuff they see in our community, in our school, in the world, really. So it's been a really great opportunity to see what the students have to say about this, because there hasn't really been a space to talk about it before. And actually the Rebel name is a huge part of why I wanted to create the club, because I saw so much discussion of that topic and other topics similar to it, and I felt that they just weren't productive, and they weren't going about it the right way. And I felt that offering this space for people to talk about this stuff and talk about these issues would be a great way to address it, and I think it has been successful. But I just, this was kind of a way for me to deal with how I was feeling in the school around this time last year. Because during the debate, I often felt like I couldn't really voice my opinion because I've been against the name, and for a long time, and I felt like it wasn't a safe environment for me to voice that opinion in the school with like such strong support for the name. So this club has given me a chance and other students a chance to finally get that out. So that's kind of a bit about the club and what we do.
Isaiah, can I ask you another question about the club over on it? Could you say one more word about how you're working with the middle school peer mentorship program? Because I didn't really know very much about that program to begin with. I just wondered how you're interacting with them, or what kind of mentorship you'd be providing to them. Yeah.
That's a very new group and a new project that we're taking on. So we meet with them also every 2 weeks for about 45 minutes, and we really do pretty much the same thing what we do at the high school. It's a little different with middle schoolers, of course, but it's very similar. And we did that because there was calls for it at the middle school. Students were ready to talk about it, and they were looking for a place to talk about it. And so middle school teachers over there reached out to us and they were asking what they could do to kind of follow in our footsteps, which was really awesome to hear from them. Awesome. But yeah, so we just talk about race, racial identity, racism, and they're very mature and into it. It's really awesome.
Yeah,
great.
Thanks, Isaiah. Yeah.
And then I had another question for you actually as well, David. The Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, what actions are we expecting out of them? So this, what we got sort of implied, there's been a lot of discussion and some priority setting, but it wasn't clear to me, are we expecting them to somehow inform policy? Are they going to make some kind of, is there some kind of timeline for recommendations that are coming out of that? Or is it, it wasn't clear what the end game was or what they were supposed to be
Before
providing.
you answer, can I add on to her question so you can answer one? You also, in your updates, you said that the subcommittee worked to identify areas of priority, which I think are aligned with what she's asking. Yeah. Can we hear a little bit of what those priorities are?
Well, again, I think, first we have the committee that was, certainly a critical part of that was to get on top of deepening our understanding of looking at implicit bias, looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. Obviously, you supported, and the community supported the addition of a coordinator, Susie Merrick's in that current position. And one of those areas is looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. The committee specifically has gotten together, working on a plan, a strategic plan, have a plan in place. A lot of the things that have happened is really about establishing the foundation of information about who we are, what we're trying to do, and making sure that we're getting out information. Many different activities have happened. Again, some of that, although Isaiah's right in that there's some supported effort going on by Susie, for instance, to support, as well as from the high school. Same thing at the middle school. But also coordinating of in-service information. This past Friday, we had a whole a series of talking about implicit bias. And the feedback that we got from our staff, again, we're in this conversation more, and teachers and staff are asking for more. And we know that's important because it then transcends to students, and it opens up the conversation. When we think we know, there's a lot we don't know. And so there's a whole series of steps that are going on and conversations. There's many, actually, that are happening. And certainly be happy to share with you a little bit more in more detail about the committee. There may be some policy changes that come out of this. There may be some very specific actions that come out or recommendations that would be forwarded to administration and to the school board if it's a policy, or whether or not there's some procedures that need to happen. Employment practices we're looking at. How are we getting information out? Questions that we're asking. Etc. So those have all been, and it's kind of random, but be happy to share with you a little bit more specifically on that plan.
I can speak to that a little bit too, Bridget and Patrick, because I sit on that committee.
I didn't want to put you on the spot, Elizabeth.
Well, you are, because I can't remember all the areas, so I'm just gonna declare dementia right now, and I'll give you the ones I remember. But one of the subcommittees is on policies. So one of the goals was to actually read through existing policies, and at a very first blush was to look at language. As we know, we have a lot of documents where there's just pretty outdated language in it. But at a higher level, it was to start to look at policies that we might want to make recommendations on. And examples would be selection interviewing, for instance, in terms of improving diversity across our staff group, for instance. Another might be disciplinary practices and looking at data that might look at how we implement disciplinary practices and any implicit bias there, for instance. Those are examples. Another area was community outreach. And it's really just communication. And I'm not going to remember. I think there's 2 other areas, and that's where I'm going to fall short. But there are 3 or 4 areas, and there are subcommittees that have worked on that. One thing we found as we went through our work is there's a really heavy dose of awareness building that goes on. And some of the things we've looked at is how do we accelerate the learning curve once you have a strategic plan in place. To your question, I'm not aware that there's any specific time frame right now, but I do think Susie has really been charged with establishing that and then bringing that process back through David into the board. But examples might be the same way that we do tabletop exercises for our safety and security of students. That was a potential recommendation that we actually incorporate professional development that included tabletop exercises around racism, around just here's situations and how do you handle and how do you educate, and building awareness and building expectations as well. So I'm sorry, I can't remember all the categories, but that's some of the work that's been done. There's a lot of exchange of information because there's a prolific writing going on right now, as you might expect, and other media that's available. And I think one of the goals of a cohesive strategic plan is, again, how do you bring staff, students, our curriculum, the community along at a pace that it kind of reflects who we want to be when we grow up, type thing. So. I
don't. Again, I want to be really clear. The specific charges to the conversation and the recommendations in the rebel, and a lot of those things those action steps have not happened. Although the foundation for a greater conversation and education, I feel, are in process and happening. And again, we're not going to put this on hold forever. I do want it to be a conversation. I think we're going to be well positioned for a much more in-depth conversation when that happens soon. Again, we're hopeful for a return of Mr. Burke, and we'll start that back up. If there needs to be other avenues, I'll have to work on that. So, questions?
Before we move off this one, I want to just commend Isaiah for your leadership, the diversity union. I appreciate the leadership you're bringing to the school. This is the kind of proud leadership that we want to have. So thank you for all your efforts.
Let me just cover Election Day. I know you talked a little bit about the election survey. Remember that our middle school is a major polling place, as well as Orchard and Chamberlain. And so we did get word from the city that they expect a pretty high turnout. And so we're in school on that day, and we're going to be putting in place some, just good traffic security measures. They want almost 100 parking spaces at the high school, middle school, that main parking lot. So we're going to scramble a little bit with school in play. So I just want to make you aware of that. And certainly we'll do the same at Chamberlain as well, and Orchard. So anyway, I want to just make you aware of those challenges that we have. It's a good thing. I think there's a lot of things that are learned when kids see that our folks are coming in and voting and exercising their democratic process. But at the same time, we also have an interface with public at a time when we're trying to be really secure, that puts us at a challenge a little bit. So we're going to work to manage that. We'll have police presence, just being available in our schools with our school resource officers, which are often there anyway. In addition, we'll have the folks from the security group as well. So that's that. Budget timeline, both John and I and Stuart and John Godak, our central office folks, have begun our conversations around looking at our next budget, and we're, I think, on time. I do think, though, that there's probably a need for some baseline start data for you, and I think I'm hoping for the next meeting that we'll give you an update on FTEs, an update on current kind of a run rate if we were to just move forward. What would that be looking like, so you get a little bit of an idea. We are currently in the process of confirming average daily membership. So all of our student counts get put in, and that's in the process of being calculated by the state, so we'll find out where we stand in that particular area. Again, a lot of moving parts. Some of you can remember, maybe you have forgotten of all the moving parts from both the state and local levels, but we're going to be giving you a little bit of a dipstick on that next meeting. I don't know if there's any specific questions regarding that.
Yeah, I did have some questions on the budget timeline. There were requests for other specific analyses that I think other board members and I had requested. I just didn't see where that was happening in this timeline. I didn't know when we should expect to see those, or which ones were coming and which ones weren't, because I think a lot of those were submitted with the caveat that we understand that not all of them might be possible in the time frame that we're talking about. So I just don't, I haven't seen any clarity on what we should be expecting and when we should be expecting it, so that we can give further guidance.
So again, you see the 16th on here. We probably need to give you more specifics on what you can expect. I know that there's been some individual kind of board desires on looking at how we might handle enrollment issues and how we would go about doing that. So I know that those are there. We'll pull those into, I'll do my very best to pull those into the next kind of budget conversation, so you at least see that they're present. And you may have some information from me on how I'm going to move them. Currently, the conversation is with the principals on where we are now, based on the data, based on our needs for, again, at the high school, for instance, personalized learning plans, PBGRs, staffing level needs, the things that we're trying to make sure that we're moving our current enrollment and expected enrollment levels. Where are we at? What do we need? Stewardship plan, as you've, through master planning and visioning, as well. What are the things that we need to, either recalibrate, move up? Bathrooms, do we need to do those sooner than we have? Again, they're on our list already, but how do we need to maybe reorganize that a little bit as well? So those are the things that we'll be kind of giving you, and we'll try to do that on somewhat of a priority basis, not just high school, individual school, but whole district.
And I saw your ad. Have you established your committee?
Haven't had a tremendous response to the ad, but
it's a good time, though, to get other people who want to be part of it.
Okay.
Being on the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, please let my office know. We'd like to get a few people to be a part of that process, give us input, and that we can listen to your concerns. So please let the school office know.
So John, that ad appeared in the other paper. It's actually been run twice. We do have individuals that have served on it in the past that I think remain interested. They've certainly said that. We'd love to have some other folks, though. This is an opportunity to take a look at what we're moving forward, ideas and questions, and then, give us a real sound advice around what they think is important from your perspective. So we would welcome that. About, the time frame would probably be, 5 or 6 meetings. And those are generally about 2 hours. Of course, I'm usually burned myself on this one. About 2 hours long or so, and maybe a fair amount of pre-reading before you come. Is that? I don't know. Some of you have served on that before. They're looking at me like that's not really.
I think the length of the meetings sounds about right. The truth is, I felt like there was less work.
There was less in this past year
than before the meetings. Actually, I was hoping there would have been more work before the meetings, because we sort of kind of came to the meetings last year and we were a little cold. We were trying to process things in the meeting, which was kind of challenging to do.
Bridget was on it last year, so
yeah. I guess I don't know how to raise this or if it's appropriate, but if we're going to see the stewardship plan for the next 3 years at the next meeting, is that stewardship plan being developed based on status quo? I mean, are there a couple of big broad assumptions you can share with us in terms of how you're developing that stewardship plan before we've made a final decision?
I mean, I think it would be a disservice to our students and to the community if I indefinitely put a hold on the stewardship plan. That would not be, I think, in fairness to good stewardship. So currently the high school and the middle school and all the schools have identified needs that we've put together through the stewardship plan. My expectation is that we continue to move those things forward with a particular eye also at the elementary schools. We know, for instance, Rick Marcotte's got I'm going to pick on one thing, carpet in the library, which I think is becoming closer to a trip hazard and needs to be addressed. I'm not going to postpone that because I know you are wondering about next steps in master planning. We're going to need to move forward. Even if you were to make a decision, I'm certainly aware that that's many years out before things would likely, and I say many, 3 to 5 years before things might start happening. So we need to make sure that our buildings are running effectively and available and ready for good learning and good teaching to happen. And so, as we have done in the past, board members, some of them, you know this, that we've used the term reorganize the stewardship plan. When we initially put the stewardship plan together, we had and that was, I don't know, 12 years ago, we front-loaded everything in the year, and we knew that there's no way, so we started to pair those things off and put them in future years. And we're doing a much better job, and again, the establishment of the Capital Reserve Fund will also be a helpful addition to us this year as well. So we're going to look at all those things, and you'll get a chance to poke back at us and say, why that one and why not this one? And we'll, again, I know that this is a particular, you know, this has got some question marks for you and for me, but again, just giving you a little cursory review of how I'm going to handle that.
One tiny thing was that on the first page of this timeline, it says January 30th, the budget book is finalized and printed, but then on January 27th, the budget books are available and posted warning to public. So there's just a little bit of a mismatch in the actual timeline that needs to be resolved, I think.
Yeah, well, some of it is, you know, with the printed version, we used to always go to print, and that was the only way. Now we post them up, so there's an opportunity to be more efficient in getting information out. But I get what you're saying, just on that quick turnaround and timeline and
That's extremely quick turnaround. The steering committee meeting where we finally agree everything with the city is on the 25th, and then by the 27th, those books are available for everyone.
Part of that is we have some timelines that we need to pay attention to, so we may have to, you know, calibrate back a little bit, because we do have to have things available prior to the March meeting, and we have so many days to do that. But I can look at that again.
And my last question was, when do we need to have any language that's going on the ballot approved? So like the budget language, or, you know, anything else that goes on as an article, what is the date by which that needs?
Yeah, we have to post the public warning. I think it actually post the warnings. It's January 27th, I think, not later than, I believe. So that's part of that whole push towards the end, Bridget. I think it's, I forget how many days, 60 days or something like that, prior to the town meeting. They have to be made available and warned.
Yeah, I just think it might behoove us to put into our timeline which meeting or where we'll see language, so that we can make sure that we're on top of it. And I know you're on top of it, but it would just be helpful for us to know what to expect when we're supposed to have things approved by, so that it can be ready on the 27th to go out to everyone.
You add that to the schedule?
Yeah, it is on the 27th on the back
Oh, it's
page.
there.
So it's, budget books are available, post warnings and public hearings.
That's what I'm saying, the warnings have to be posted then, so the language has to be out there for everyone to look at on that date, right? So
Prior to, you're saying you guys looking at.
well, we would have to look at it first and approve it, and then, you know, have lawyers look over it and
Yeah.
all that stuff before then. So it just should probably be added into one of these.
Yeah, we have that timeline at which we've adhered to. Again, it would be good, and from your perspective and others, we can add it in there. Yep.
Any other questions on the budget timeline? Okay. Moving us on to item 8, master planning and visioning. I know David sent us a number of items in response to questions that we had posed during one of our last conversations. Let me start us with any follow-up to those. I know some questions were posed and answered. Are there any questions on the answers or any new questions?
I was just trying to suss out exactly what was new versus sort of consolidating information that we had seen before. So the question and answer document with the different colors was something that we had seen before, correct?
Right.
The PTO information was new. I have to say I was quite surprised by it, actually, given the discussions we've had about the inequity between the PTOs. If I'm reading the numbers correctly, Chamberlain last year spent on student activities $22,665, which is $99 a student. Orchard was at $24,288, which was $68 a student. And Brick Marcotte was $25,670, which was $72 a student. So in my mind, that was backwards from what I would have expected. I didn't quite understand the other new information, which was the per pupil calculation. I just didn't, the per pupil calculation I thought was meant to be a per pupil debt service, or was it meant to be budget? Those seem like the two big new things.
Attachment 1?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think that was a combination of a question I think Martin asked or I asked, and they got combined together, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of that was meant to be, what are the per pupil costs for the schools, all the schools, based on the various scenarios.
Right.
And what I think we got was the per pupil cost by elementary school, which is also useful. And then we got a follow-up related to debt service. So I think it's a little bit of a challenging question to ask in the first place.
Yeah.
But I think that's my interpretation of what we received. Okay. And I think what the thing that I took away that was the most interesting to me in this was the some of the cost information by school per pupil and the staffing per school per pupil clearly showed that we're mitigating some of the risk in one of the schools by staffing it at a different level. So that was a cost that I think I wasn't as attuned to that I am now. So.
The other one that really kind of surprised me was the islands numbers. I didn't realize quite how big they were, I have to say. And that raised in my mind, again, the capacity issue.
Correct. Yeah.
If we have that many middle schoolers, if we're talking about 80 middle schoolers potentially joining the ranks, do we then still even have space at the middle school if we wanted to add the 5th grade to the middle school? Or are we going to be using those classrooms for additional tuition students that are coming here or merging in?
And just for the sake of the community, so the school choice vote in the islands would not take effect till the 2019-2020 school year. So if there are additional students coming to South Burlington as a result of that vote passing, which we don't know if it will or not, that would be the timeline and when we might see students, because they'd have choice, so they may not come here.
And the choice is starting at middle school?
Yeah.
19.
So I guess I took something slightly different from some
All
of
of
the
18.
numbers than you did, Patrick, as far as the, yes, we're spending more per pupil at Chamberlain. Now, whether that is to mitigate potential risks, or is that just the fact that because we have fewer students there, we necessarily have smaller classes. You know, this is the thing we battle every year as far as choosing on whether to have a class of 30 or 2 classes of 15, for instance. And we choose to go with the 2 classes of 15. So, I mean, we have smaller classes at Chamberlain, and that's not necessarily to mitigate any particular risk. It may be, you know, it could be. I don't think it's definitively tells us one way or another. But I do also take from that, you know, there's a few different items of information which are very interesting. As far as the free and reduced lunch, which is an indicator of poverty, definitely Chamberlain has the higher percentage there. So I guess that could go to the mitigation question that you've raised there, and why more money is put into there. But it's not necessarily the case. And there's different studies out there that talk about class size and how much improvement you can expect through smaller class size. Although it does supposedly, or my understanding, the research shows that for higher risk students or impoverished students, smaller class sizes do help. But the other thing that's just interesting is the SBAC information we're going to be looking at, and that Chamberlain is in fact equivalent to that. You know, that's another factor that's kicking around here. So it's really hard for me to tease out inequities here when our students, yes, there's a more challenging population because of ELL, because of higher poverty. At Chamberlain, we are putting some more money there. It's not clear that it's necessarily because of the free and reduced lunch population as much as just a smaller population, maybe. And yet we're getting pretty decent results. I mean, I'm not seeing inequities as far as education outcomes. I don't know of inequities with respect to health outcomes. I still want, there's data that I still would like to see about those two items, which I've reiterated before, to tease this out a little bit more. So there's different ways, I guess, of interpreting some of this data.
And part of it, I think, Martin, is what we take from administration in terms of recommendation, because we had a contingency teacher in the balance, and David recommended it at Chamberlain when he could have easily looked at either Orchard numbers. Sorry.
We'll get you volumed up.
Could have looked at numbers at either, any of the schools really had potential to add an extra teacher. And so, I mean, that may in fact be by design.
Right. Yes, I would like to see if we're definitively putting more resources into Chamberlain and where those resources are going specifically to address, the perceived inequities. And, if that is the case, then whatever we're doing a pretty good job with it, because Chamberlain is performing very well, at least on the limited, what you can get out of an SBAC score, which, admittedly is fairly narrow. So.
Well, I'll do a quick response. Certainly class size, you're all aware of kind of when we look at inequities, it's hard to, when those smaller class sizes, when they do get smaller, when we particularly talk back at diversity, equity, inclusion, that changes the complexion of your school. So that could be perceived as an inequity. We currently fractionalize a lot of our FTEs. So you don't have a 1.0 music teacher, physical education teacher, and that brings about some level of inequity as well, because those folks generally are looking for full-time employment. So that creates a transition which is more inequitable. That said, in short, I think we're mostly a satisfying district. I mean, I know we don't do everything right, but most everything we're doing currently, that one spreadsheet that I tried to provide you, that Excel spreadsheet, which had some adders in it, and it's probably far more detailed than you wanted, but it really looks at where we have needs, where we have, and we add some fictitious students to help make sure we're meeting the need. But and I think the results show that we have I venture to say, high level of satisfaction. But I think our community and our students are satisfactorily doing appropriate, and part of that is because of the way in which we've resourced them. And it is not 100% equal across the board. And again, I think to your point, that one very easy, visible piece is that FTE on the classroom size. It's not 30, we divide it to 15. And if it gets 29, 28, 27, then we have, that begins to be more difficult. And it's not, some people may say the class size is great, having it so small, but in some cases, if you're the 2 boys and, 11 girls, or vice versa, then that isn't so good, So, anyway.
Well, and I don't know if there's not any clear indication that class sizes are what's leading to the Chamberlain doing real well. I mean, it has to do probably more so with the teachers we have in those classes.
Professional development.
And professional development, et cetera.
Math services or math coaching,
right,
we allocate accordingly to kind of those needs. So
and I do understand that, the class size issue at Chamberlain, if we keep going down, the answer is not necessarily
not always class size.
That we change the location as, the answer could be redistricting, I mean, so
it's just simply a component. Is the only thing when I was asked these questions, and I want to make sure I get back to Bridge, I mean, some of these questions came back as a result of our last, and so I know it gets confusing, like, was this a question that was, how many times ago? I tried to stay pretty specific to responding to the questions that were most recent, although I think you could look back in the the various other questions and see that there's similarities to those. So,
any other questions for David on what we had, questions and follow-up before we move on to next steps? So, do we have any proposals from board members on how we move this forward? We've been talking about this for some time. We are still not necessarily.
Is that all the conversation on all of these handouts?
That's all the questions that the board members had on them.
Can I just ask you a clarification?
You may.
It's a big concern issue, and there's this document from October, and it says in point 7, we know that 40 more homes in the Chamberlain School District are to be demolished. I don't think that's right. I think that there's a number of homes that are being re-offered.
Correct.
But a number of people turned it down the first time. I mean.
Correct. It's the possibility.
Called the home takeover program. It's just, it's an optional piece offered by the airport.
40 more homes are to be demolished, so I just wanted to point out, I don't think that's an accurate way to position that.
I think the board agrees with you. I don't think they know that.
And then just humor for the moment, the noise disruption by school at 60 seconds a day. I'm sure that if you asked Orchard and Central to donate 60 seconds a day for meditation to equate, they would be thrilled. I mean, that's it. That surprised me, actually.
Yeah,
I thought it would be more.
That you thought it would be more. Again, I wanted to be clear that I wasn't trying to embellish. It was from conversations that I've had with teachers that kind of did put their finger up as we would do if we're in the parking lot. We just don't challenge the conversation, and I felt that that was what I was getting back. So I wasn't trying to embellish, trying to give real accuracy to what I had. And again, that doesn't mean, however, and I thought you were going to go there, Monica, there certainly are other disruptions that can happen when there's construction happening over here and my classroom's right there and there's a beep going on, So it doesn't mean that there's never any disruption, fire alarms and things like that. But that's a known, reoccurring situation that happens at Chamberlain currently and is expected to do so into the future.
I know I was distracted 180 minutes a day myself during school, so.
You're getting laughter from other board members.
It's sad but true.
That answers a lot of questions, actually.
This was updated June 15th, but there is a statement in here that says that redistricting is not a good thing.
Which document are you looking at?
All right, this is attachment 2, page, I don't know, it's right above 5th grade. And under master planning and visioning, July 27, top of the page, it says, our study of educational opportunities has made clear that demographics within our elementary school, blah, blah, blah. We know redistricting is not the answer. Maybe a quick fix. I just was, I
haven't found it yet.
Okay.
Do you have a page number?
What page, Monica?
Just tell us what page.
It's got a page number. It's, all right.
Is it the colored?
Yeah, attachment 2, and under the master planning and visioning, it starts with transitions. And it goes to one elementary, and then it goes to neighborhood schools, and it's in the neighborhood schools section.
It's past
but not all of them.
past
Past
the
the
pages
pages,
that
yeah.
have numbers on them.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, the paging from the back.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And just at the top, it basically says, we know redistricting is not the answer. That was the first time I kind of heard that stated so definitively. And I just wanted to make sure that.
It says, we know redistricting
greater
is not the answer to greater diversity. Not the be-all and end-all answer. It's just not the answer to diversity.
Okay.
Isn't that what you were saying, David?
Yes, these were my responses to board questions. Sorry about that.
Okay, but redistricting isn't off the table with that statement.
No, I mean, I think that's certainly an option when we have enrollment fluctuations that begin to push on certain schools, whether they're too big or too small. We're currently in a place right now where Chamberlain, if it dips below 200, and I've indicated that need to be actively looking at redistricting, and the process by which you go by redistricting is not easy, you know, because where people come from, where are children going to come from what neighborhoods, how do you create an equitable balance for 3 schools and feeding? Again, we did pretty good. I have to say, we did pretty good in 1998 when we did that, that it was pretty balanced. That said, it's not an easy process, because when you tell some folks that you're going to go, you know, your 2 kids went here and your 3rd one's going to go here, that is, we lose a lot of what I call trust deposits, you know, that are really important with our families. We withdraw some of those, and you know, it can be done. It has been done, but it's not easy.
While we're on this topic, I had asked a question that was a more in detail question with an ask for information, which I understand we haven't had time to do yet. My question is how we direct new developments as to where those students are going to go and what control we have over that, and what the timeline is when a new development comes up for a decision-making process at the city level. How do we tell them where new students are going? Because it just makes sense that simply in my mind, that a lot of the development is happening in the Southeast Quadrant.
Yep.
We already have students from the Southeast Quadrant going to Chamberlain. Chamberlain is the school that is already low on enrollment. So the question is, why aren't we sort of directing students toward Chamberlain in the Southeast Quadrant?
It's a good question. So there is a map that I posted up on some of my questions. Shows you where our current kids go, and that's kind of a funny looking map. And certainly if we were to you know, continue to look at, first of all, the city says these are known areas that are open for development, and that map also shows that where there's number of units. And when a new development comes in, they have to go through a process where which they connect with us and say, where would these kids go to school? And you're right, and so we've opened that envelope up so that Chamberlain is in the receipt. But it's hard when the line's already drawn to a development and you have kids already participating in another school right next door, you know. So it's a little challenging when it's not 100% like new development, you know. So
what you're saying is you're splitting up neighborhoods.
Well, it depends on how the neighborhood comes. That Southeast Quadrant particularly has, you know, some planned unit developments that we've targeted to certain areas. There's you know, and that developments don't get built out in you know, in 1 or 2 years times. It takes several years. So in some cases, when we redistricted, some of those areas started to go to Orchard, for instance, and so now you have families that are there and they're going to the Orchard, and yet there's another 4, 5, 6 houses going in that development. You'd like to say, oh, could you go here? But yet there's connections already to that other school. Again, I'm not necessarily explaining, I mean, we have in the past with kindergarten, we've also opened up, hey, would you be willing to go? But that also challenges us in transportation too, because we're going, you know, then we got to figure out, and we did that actually with, under the No Student Left Behind Act, we actually had, because of our numbers, not because of our kids not doing well, we had to open up Rick Marcotte to allow those. And so we were challenged with how to get students from this location to that school and that school.
So an expansion of a development area, I can understand. If it was a brand new development, what would be your process? Would that come to the board, or would that be an administrative decision?
Well, right now it's administrative decision.
Okay.
I probably, at this point, if I had a lot, I would engage with a conversation with you to say, this development, actually, new development, has neighborhoods not too far from it that have kids going to other locations, but because of the current numbers, we should designate it to Chamberlain, you know. And that's kind of a one-off development decision that might not be in concert with, you know, some of the things we're trying to do. Again, I've read over the 1998 work. There's 2 massive binders on protocol procedures committees. It's a long process, and I'm currently not equipped to tell you how we go about making those determinations and forecast decisions around what neighborhoods are going to yield the balancing numbers that we need to have 3 equally, you know, equal size elementary schools for the next 10 years. You know, we did it in 1998, so more than 10 years, but.
So any other either questions or thoughts on how we could move this forward? I know
I had one more. It's just important because I know you guys are trying to move forward. This is the first time I've seen the September 2nd document that talks about 21st century learning. And on the first page, under why, the question is, 21st century learning should be defined. What is it? How will the children be more engaged? I mean, this was a big part of, ultimately your point of view.
Yep.
Right? And it says here in the response, why is this important? 21st century learning is a concept still being developed. And it goes on to say, therefore, pigeonholing a definition of 21st century learning or skills detracts from the flexibility we must embrace when thinking about how schools and classrooms must be designed. That to me says that the answer of what 21st century learning is not what's in it, it's what the design of the building is. This really surprises me, and I know that a lot of, I'm looking at you just because yours is the go with number 5.
Yep.
I'm wondering what else you may have seen, because this isn't very substantive.
Is that my response? I'm not sure where you're looking at.
It is the response provided to you guys on September 2nd. So very highly
We need a few more documents.
This is the only document, attachment number 3, that I see that discusses 21st century learning, and that's a huge question, and that answer is, like, I'm just not, I expected that you had seen a lot more information when you guys put your points of view together on which direction you were going, that's all.
So for me, the 21st century learning concept has been used to define lots of different things as we've moved this forward. For me, the reason I was an advocate for option 5 was because I thought the flexibility of the building could lend educational value to the entire process. And I've done my own personal research on this, and I felt like the ability for teachers to work together, to have flexible classrooms, to have multiple spaces that can be continually set up and used for multiple purposes, be able to reconfigure other spaces as needed, to inspire kids, to get them really engaged and to love learning and not to feel like they are kind of in a traditional classroom. And I know through my own personal experience that a number of kids start to not enjoy class after a while because it's sitting in a chair all day long doing repetitive type things. Not that the teachers aren't engaging, but the facility can help us engage students in a new way. So that was a big reason on why I was an advocate for option 5.
Okay,
and continue to be.
You guys never did the survey with the teachers to ask them that, and what you're describing doesn't sound very foreign to me, being an elementary school parent. That sounds like what you're describing, I'm not familiar with here at Orchard.
Well, I think.
Yeah, just they move around a lot, the teachers, so.
Yeah, so I think it's really important. This is the same thing around, I think, to the point of we don't have dissatisfaction in our schools. I think we have quite different. We have very satisfied children doing very good things, and so we have a very, very good system. That's part of I think, some of the challenges. That said, 21st century learning, I, again, don't want to say that it's happening every minute of every day in every classroom, but we have many of our teachers that are engaging in high-level functionality where it's, providing a lesson and stopping and getting a hands-on opportunity, but it is not without loss at times. In order to transition in my room to bring in and coordinate bringing something in where I can have the students then touch it and put it into play changes. So we're doing it, but we could do more of it. Again, if 4 of us were, in connected classrooms and we had a space where we could say, boom, go and do it, and we could utilize that. I probably could have done it before, but it takes more challenge, it takes more resources. It's not as easy to emulate in every classroom in every single one of our current schools as it could be in a different model. So I want to be really clear. We currently, I think, are doing really good 21st century things. But again, I think we could do better. I think we could do better, and I think that's a statement that we struggle with, like, hey, can I get your supplies over here? Can I get them, Thursday? And I would love them too. And so there's a lot of those things that make our facility much more of an engaging 21st century space, right? We have some rooms that are better than others. Our project rooms down here are bigger, and they allow for a little bit more connectivity that way. Smaller spaces at Chamberlain, not so much. Again, we make it work, and we're going to continue. And I think that gets at current satisfaction, although we can do better, particularly looking at some of the challenges that were again, this is me speaking, some of the challenges that are kind of up on us and will be probably upon us for the next 5, 6, 10 years.
I just want to point out again, though, you guys never did the teacher survey. I mean, when the task force recommended it, you did not talk to teachers about
Yeah.
that.
Well, we certainly have. I think administratively, you know, it's a conversation, classroom teacher, when we're talking about, you know, transferable skills, when we're talking about, I mean, all of our professional development, again, that we do on a regular basis as a district, we work hard at those things. Those conversations are embedded in some of the work. So we're talking about it all the time around how we can make sure that that level of engagement, that opportunity exists for kids to be, yeah. And so you're right, we can do more, we can ask more, we certainly can survey more, Monica, and you know, we're going to continue to do that. We have to be always thinking about making those connections with our students.
I mean, it seems to me that the lesson, or what I took from this a while ago, the statement that you were pointing out, is that if we were going to be building a new school, we would want it to be very flexible. We want it to, in fact, accommodate 22nd century learning. I mean, you know, so that's how I take this, and it's. And our current facilities are not as flexible, but we're making do, and we're doing very well with them. So, anyway.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I like hearing about you talking about kids getting excited about school, and it's just striking me as someone who I worked in the high school, and I feel like the middle school and the high school are really the places where it would be good to find a way to get kids engaged. I find my elementary school kids are still loving school right now. And I just had a kid go over to 6th grade, and like the shift of like, oh God, middle school. I mean, she's enjoying it, but when you talk about that engagement in the 21st century learning, I feel like talking about implementing that at middle school and high school would be really exciting too. And
so a good point. And it's the middle school and the high school are not absent from our desire, whether it's engaging with our business partners and making those learned skills more relevant, getting kids out on internships, which we do now, but we can do more. Our middle school students also engaging in more relevant tasks, you know, and also having spaces. So part of our at least proposed plan forward is that we do need to put some resources into the high school and the middle school. You know, $20 million is not a small amount of money at the high school to help make those functional spaces better, as well as at the middle school. So it's not, you're right.
Agreed. Let's go back here first.
Just a comment about surveying the teachers again. Having worked in schools for a long time, there are the things that the teachers say to the administrators and the superintendents, and there are things that they say in the lunchroom when nobody's there. And they are excited about what they're doing, and they're doing really good work. And I think it would really be beneficial to ask them in an anonymous place where they could answer those questions. If you had $5,000, let's just pick a small.
Oh boy.
You had $5,000. How would you spend it? And my guess is you would come up with some really creative ideas about things that teachers would do to work together to make things even better than they are. And I'm not sure that a new building is going to be first on their list. Now, if you put out there, we're going to have $500 million or however much this is going to take, they might say, well, that's really nice. But my guess is they would be as excited about that $5,000 option as they would be about thinking about a whole new classroom and a whole new building and that sort of thing, that it is going to change the sense of neighborhood schools. And so while they might have this lovely new building, there's going to be a whole different sense to the atmosphere in that school because there's another piece that will be lost. So I think it's really important to ask them those questions in a way that they don't have to look the principal or the superintendent or the assistant principal or anybody in the eye. They only have to answer that question where nobody else is looking, and they can say really honestly, when I dream and I dream big, this is what I see. And give them a chance to say, and they might be able to define much better than any of these documents have done so far, about what 21st century learning looks like. But so far, you're only giving us a concept. My guess is they could tell you really concretely what that looks like. My other guess is they probably would say they're quite happy where they are and let's do some things differently in our building instead of disrupting everything. But I could be wrong about that. But I think the important thing is to ask them where in a place where they can answer that. Like we go to the privacy of the ballot box next week, I'm never going to know how you vote. That people would be able to do that so that we would never know who was that person who had that really cool idea. Or the other person who was really unhappy and we didn't know that he or she was unhappy. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think you're right. That our teachers, and we're proud that they love their place, you know, and that's the other dilemma, that when you look at there's no dissatisfaction. There's high energy and they're making it work, and so it's hard sometimes to, you know, things are working well, and on behalf of the community and a school board that's been supportive, we're doing really good things, and we want to make sure that continues. I think you're always right about asking the teachers, and for the most part, you know, when we open up and develop deeper trust, we get very authentic feedback, and that doesn't mean that it would be the same as in the lunchroom, but you know, I think we're really available to our staff. You know, we get a lot of feedback, and we're hearing from them, and a lot of them, you know what, they love their schools, and I love the fact that they love their schools, but I want to make sure that we can continue to do the things that we need to do too. So those are the deeper questions.
One more question.
I guess just tying a couple of these thoughts together, I'm a big fan of, you know, programming and educators, and I think they make a huge difference. I'm totally with you in the priority there. Buildings are important, they're real, we have them, we need them. And I guess picking up on a couple of themes here, one of the commonalities I heard during the whole debate was where we really need this is at the high school level. I didn't hear a lot of people disagree on that. And it strikes me that the high school was built only like 50 years ago. And we, you know, when you're talking about building buildings, and I'm sorry, I'm math wrong, but at $50 to $70 million, we can't afford to build $50, $70 million buildings every 50 years. We can't. So I think it's important to call it out to Monica's point here, like, we don't want to be an early adopter here. When we set out to build a 21st, 22nd century learning building for that much money, we want to know exactly what we're doing. We want to have good models that are proven that we can follow. We want to be able to articulate exactly what it is. And just like a little bit from the business world, it's all about test and learn before spending the big capital. What can we do now? Can we create a 21st century learning space in one of the schools and learn from it for 2-3 years? So that when we go to spend that $50, $70 million, we know it's going to be a good building for way more than 50 years. I just want to add tie those themes together. That's just one point of view.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
I just had 2 comments. One, all the documentation I ever read never stated that new facilities are a requirement of the 21st century.
Right.
And what I've seen throughout the state of Vermont, teachers have been doing this for 20 years. So it's methodologies, it's relationships, it's bonding the students, it's all of that, and we do that with existing buildings. The other point I wanted to point out was there's still a lot of uncertainty about the destiny of Rick Marcotte Central School, and I'm an operational intelligence guy. That's what I do for a living. I deal with the here and now in the next 5 years. So I'd like to ask the board to remove the uncertainties of elementary school consolidation, put them to rest, because uncertainty creates a negative response in relationships, markets, organizations, property values, everything. And the longer the uncertainty exists, the more dramatic the negative effect. Right now, we've been camping on this issue for 3 or 4 years, and case in point, at Marcotte, there's a playground, which is already funded, I believe. It's on hold.
Not quite, but close.
Okay, but money's been sitting around for 3 or 4 years. Half those kids have aged out of Marcotte already. So it's time for the school board, I think, to be clear about eliminating the uncertainty and just getting rid of the question of closing Marcotte, get it off the table. Let's make a definitive answer. Let's move forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the public before we continue the board discussion? Yes, Monica.
There is definitely a lot of sentiment out there. I think that the city has done so much, and these are just the last getting people really excited in a new way about what can happen in the city center. And I very much want to and plan to support it. I didn't think I'd be there a year ago, and I am now, but I'm telling you, there are a lot of people that are still worried about voting for the TIF in less than a week because of this uncertainty. And you guys say that you follow Robert's rules, I believe, and I think it's Duncan's letter to all of you posed a very fair request. And according to Robert's rules, an indefinite hold, whatever, would be until the next session. And you have 7 meetings until town meeting day. And ironically, I don't know what your plans are, but the 2 people that are most significantly for immediate consolidation are the 2 people that are running in March. And it's not, I'm not running, not saying anyone's going to run against you, but you have an opportunity in March for voters to step up and give their 2 cents if you were willing to indefinitely postpone until the next session and really just let people breathe, especially after this weekend, we're all really just need to just breathe.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the public? All right. Board discussion. Thoughts on next steps?
I will offer, rather than get into sort of a rationale or individual justification for a position, I wanted to offer kind of 3 high-level points that I think support at least the position I've taken. I think that respect most of the other board members' positions, but I'll offer it up as really just a platform for discussion as far as next steps. And I would say these may be superseded by some umbrella strategy statement, but what I've kind of thought about through the course of the meetings is really where, and this is consistent with my original position statement, where I would recommend sort of next actions. One of the things I would preface my comments with is, this is a project that you could put a bow on it and say, we're not going to talk about it for a period of a year or something. But the reality is, this is what a board like ours is charged to do, is to think about these issues on an ongoing basis. So regardless of what conclusion we come to, issues like this will remain active in terms of board discussion and administrative activity as it relates to delivering quality education to our K through 12 population. So I'll just throw this out here for consideration. What I tried to do is keep these 3 bullet points at a pretty high level, so there are some potential subpoints to these, but just for purposes of discussion, I'll offer these 3. These are in a specific order of priority, as I believe they should be. And I will say these weren't developed in a vacuum. I've had input through one-on-one conversations, so I can't take full ownership for these, but if they don't go anywhere, I will take that ownership. So the first bullet point would be to identify the specific needs at the high school and middle school for upgrades and the educational value of each, with a recommendation on timelines and impacts to taxpayers. The second bullet point in order of priority is to identify and monitor issues which may serve to accelerate or decelerate a consolidation strategy. And I have a couple of including but not limited to statements there. And the third bullet point would be develop a plan for possible consolidation or consolidation that includes sufficient details regarding operational implementation. Again, I can provide some thought process behind each of those. But I would offer those 3 up for my colleagues to consider. And I don't know, Patrick, did you want me to repeat those briefly, or?
No, that was good for me.
Okay.
I understood that. One of the things that I would offer to kind of add to that conversation is some kind of a timeline on on expectations of the board to fulfill those obligations in whatever form that we do that, whether that be no sooner than, but at least no later than, so that we have a plan in place. Some kind of dates would be helpful for that, I think, for both some of the community questions as well as holding ourselves accountable to finish that work in a timely manner.
So I have a few thoughts on that. I mean, first of all, I do see the big, and I've said this before, the big question to me is what's going to happen at Chamberlain with the changing neighborhood, with the F-35s coming and such, and that's why I've asked for, and I would say those are some of the issues that we'd be talking about monitoring in your second point. And it's a question to me of whether the location and the physical space at Chamberlain, if there's something about that that triggers needing to move at some point. I'm uncomfortable with the concept of the second point to the extent that it suggests that consolidation is going to happen and it's either going to accelerate or decelerate. And I would say, as of today, I would say there's not going to be any consolidation given what I've seen today. But I do understand that there may be cause down the road, depending primarily on what happens at Chamberlain. So I would put it a little bit differently, that we should be identifying and monitoring issues that may cause the district to consolidate the elementary schools, which would recognize that right now we do not see the cause for consolidating the schools. I would also say, I mean, it's potential, you know, though I want to see Central there, I want to see that as part of a neighborhood school in a developed downtown. I would leave open the fact that let's see how that in fact develops. I think that it should be developing so that it's a multi-use, just given the way the zoning is for that area, it should be multi-use with residences. But if for some reason it ends up that it isolates Central School more than it makes it part of a neighborhood, then that's another thing that could lead us or cause us to reconsider consolidation. Again, that would be some point in the future. I'm fine generally with the concept, though, that in the interim, because we do see some trends, we do see some definite threats, primarily to Chamberlain, that we should be proceeding and answering certain questions and figuring out a transition plan. Because if we do end up needing to close Chamberlain because our students there are suffering because of the location or physical space, then we need to know where we're going to move them. I like, as an initial approach, consolidating into Central and to Orchard. But there are questions to be answered there, such as capacity. And the community will also have to understand that to do that, we'd probably be moving the 5th grade to the middle school. So we need to look at how to do an appropriate transition of the 5th grade to the middle school. And those questions and those transitions should be scoped out before we find out for sure that Chamberlain is going to stay there or not. Because if 2019 comes along and it's unworkable because of where the neighborhood's going and the F-35s are coming, then we want to be able to move relatively rapidly to resolve that. So that's kind of my thoughts. So I'm close to where you are. I have a little bit problem with the language in your second point.
Yeah, so to your second point, what I heard, or how I interpreted what I heard when I heard the word plan, was exactly your last point, is something that's in place so that if we do have to move quickly, we have a plan. Not a commitment that we will do it, right, but a plan that if we need it, we have it there and we don't have to start thinking about it when it happens to us.
Correct.
So I didn't see the second bullet being as a commitment, but as building the plan so that you're ready to move.
Well, I see, I mean, the language on that second point is identifying, monitor issues that would cause us to, I don't know if I got the exact language, accelerate or decelerate. Can you read that again? I want to make sure I understand.
And I think the intent is more in line with what Patrick said, which is identify and monitor issues which may serve to accelerate or decelerate. And I understand your point, but I think inclusive in that comment is the the notion that by the time data would present that students may be disadvantaged in a certain environment, if we don't have a plan on the shelf that's operational and we can execute against on, then there's a period of time when that population is not served as well as it could be. The flip side is deceleration to me includes zero, which includes shelving a plan that says we had a plan and we were monitoring these issues. The issues did not come to bear to warrant the level of consolidation we planned for. And part of that's driven by, I mean, that's the professional background I came from, which is you build plans for contingencies, and you know, based on what actually transpires, you're willing to shelve those.
I have a couple of concerns about that plan. One is that I feel like what I'm hearing from the community, what I believe after reviewing the masses of data that's been put before us, is that we should make a commitment to these 3 elementary schools and not just say, oh, you know, consolidations, you know, not ideal, but these schools aren't ideal either. They are what other communities want. These schools are what other communities strive for, and I'm concerned about the idea about not putting exactly a time frame on how long we'll leave them open. It does a few things. It reduces morale in the community. It reduces morale in those schools. I think in the case of Chamberlain, it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, if you say that this is up for potentially a school, we're potentially closing it, we're not sure what the time frame is. As a parent, why would you move into that neighborhood? Or if you had another option, why wouldn't you move out of that neighborhood before your kids got to school age, thereby sort of fulfilling the idea that Chamberlain is, you know, reducing its enrollment and is substandard in terms of size, and that it should be closed. But even for Central as well, I think parents and the community need some kind of direction from us that there are a certain number of years we can plan on for those schools to be there. My second concern is capacity. We have devoted so much time to this issue, and we have limited capacity as a board, we have limited capacity as an administration, and I would really like to see us focusing less on this than on curriculum, than focusing on the 21st century learning stuff and the other things that we've heard from the community and that I would like to see in our curriculum, and really, you know, pinpointing those and saying these are the things that we want to focus on. And so I hear the specific concern about Chamberlain, and I do think that we need to do some kind of study about noise and educational impacts and health impacts. And I do think we need to sort of understand at a high level, at a very high level, what would need to be done if we needed to move those specific students. But I think we need to move away from options 4 and 5, frankly, and say that we're shelving those. I really do. And I won't go into the whole long 10-page reason why, but my concern is that if we sort of leave it out there that we're going to focus on an operational plan for consolidation, we end up heading down that path. And what I think we should be doing is really committing to the schools that we have and not delaying things that can make those schools the best that they can be while we're sort of still thinking about whether we might consolidate them. I'm worried that, you know, a whole, you know, group of kids is going to pass through these schools while they're kind of on hold, and we're not really doing a whole lot of upgrading, or we're not doing anything creative to improve the curriculum because we're just waiting to see what's going to happen. And I just don't want to see us in that wait and see mode for that many years.
I like the plan. I think it capitalizes on what we have in common on the board in terms of identifying the needs at the high school and middle school as a priority. It monitors my deep concern about some of the external pressures at Chamberlain School and at City Center. And frankly, I think it's irresponsible of us not to look at what's happening in the airport area as it's growing and becoming more of an issue for Chamberlain School in terms of both neighborhood decimation and noise. And I think that the capacity issue is one of the things that we can look at in terms of things that we monitor in number 2 as we go forward. I don't think our school, this district, has ever been in a place where we would disservice kids as we look to the future. I just don't believe that we would go down that road.
Yeah, I don't think if we're monitoring these issues that could, in my view, cause the district to consolidate the elementary schools, that means that we are going to consolidate schools, even if we see certain things happening in the Chamberlain neighborhood. And in my view, the threshold's fairly high. I don't see the threshold is even close as far as what I would look at to say Chamberlain needs to close. I would want to look at objectively what the health and education outcomes are from the location, from the physical space. And what I see right now, when I see the SBAC scores, when I understand what's going on there, we're doing a great job. I don't see that the education outcomes are negative at all. I don't know what the health outcomes are. We haven't had that study yet. So I would be looking really at those very objective things, which in my view would almost force us that we would have to consider closing that school if it becomes unworkable. So that's kind of where
clear. I have no problem monitoring. And I think we should be. It's irresponsible not to be monitoring some of these things that we've talked about monitoring. Where I have a problem is saying that we're putting together in detail a plan for consolidation. It just assumes that at some point we're going, I know that you said that deceleration might mean 0, but if we're using board capacity and administrative capacity and all of that to really study it on an ongoing basis, it leaves that question out there. And I think that we're all capable enough, the administration is capable enough, if we do find something that does suddenly create a crisis. A lot of this stuff is stuff that's already there, stuff that we already know about, and it can be pulled together. I mean, as you said, if we're monitoring, we see the warning signs coming down the road, and right now there isn't a reason to put a plan for consolidation in place.
Any other questions or discussion from the board, and then I'll go back to the community?
Well, I would add that I haven't gotten to the point of the question, and I've talked to Elizabeth about this a little bit, of the how do we do the strategic plan for possible consolidation, because I agree with Bridget as well that we have priorities as we have our first cohort that will be going through proficiency-based graduation coming up. We have personal learning plans. We're still working on trying to understand how we're monitoring ends, which if we had that right now, we'd have a better idea of what's going on at Chamberlain and our elementary schools. So there are a lot of immediate and very important initiatives that we are undertaking right now. So when I start thinking about, well, how are we going to actually do it, then my level of concern does rise as far as for the element of coming up with a detailed operational plan. The concept's good. I don't have the same problem as Bridget has with the concept. It's the execution that definitely worries me.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things from my perspective on trying to manage this, and I don't know, I think Bridget said this, I mean, I think if we're, and some of the community members said the same, if we're always in a state of like flux, it does have a major impact on community members. And I think, if you have a plan, a monitoring, I think you put on hold, for the next 5 years, or some period of time, a time decision factor that says it's off, and we're going to continue to monitor these things, which will plug into, years 6, 7, 8, making some informed decisions, and kind of be able to plug those things into that way, I think would be helpful, because it is hard, and I want all of our community members to just absolutely love the opportunity for engaging their kids in learning environment, and at the same time we can be monitoring budgetary, keeping our budget so that it is satisfying the outcomes that we're looking for, and wondering how that might compare if we were to have done some things. So maybe you'll have some of that baseline data similar to what I think Elizabeth said. But from my perspective, if we're always in flux, then I think whoever said that, I don't know why I would want to go there. I've heard coming from California that, maybe that school might not be there, but you say kind of no, but I'm still in a quandary, so I'm going to go over here. So I think, some certainty on time, that time piece would be really important, and not to be too short, but, 5 years or 6 years or something like that, and we'll reevaluate based on these data points.
And the additional capacity issue is that we'd be asking for this identification of the needs at the high school and middle school as a priority, so.
Yeah, my only concern with that timeline that you mentioned, David, is the airport situation and the Chamberlain area and what's happening there. So I would be nervous about committing to any time frame that long, and frankly, the board will change and the other board will make their own decision, right? They're not obligated to a decision that we make today or tomorrow.
But I understand that, and what I do understand, though, is if that's the case, then I'm going to do everything I can to ensure that, if we need to redraw some components so we get enrollment, uptick there, and if we need to do more mitigation, then we're going to go full board mitigation, and so, I'm able to then respond. And that would be for a period of time that makes financial sense, so what you hate to do is put something in year one and say, geez, we just invested all this money and then 2 years later we're taking out. No resident wants to do that type of situation and have money, that isn't well considered.
So let me see if I can navigate us to the next step here. So what I think I'm hearing is a majority of the board would be willing to support Elizabeth's proposal. It's not tied to any dates right now or timelines, but I think the concept sounds like it's agreeable to a majority. I understand that, Bridget. I don't want to put words around it. Does it sound like you support?
I support the high school and the middle school. I support sort of the first 2 bullet points.
Yeah.
The last bullet point I do not support.
So do we want to try to move something forward on that front? Do we want to add to that with some timelines to the point that David made and that we've heard from the community and that we've talked about? To create some clarity there?
I think we need a timeline.
Yeah, and I'm, with what David has said, it makes it clearer to me that the third item should be put off as well, that we shouldn't be putting a lot of resources, or we shouldn't be leaving it in flux by doing the, consolidation plan, or at least not in the near term. Maybe we plan on 2 years from now or some period of time that we start that process up to go inside with a 5-year.
Repeat for me the third bullet that you were talking about.
That's the developing a strategic plan for possible consolidation and the concerns that Bridget said. And I think I understood that David was agreeing that there's some concern with that, of if that makes it seem like we're in flux and we don't have a definitive time period.
So let me just, I'm trying to figure out how do we connect the dots between the other statements that I think I've heard you made and I know I've made about if the F-35s are coming and we know when they're coming, and that creates a significant problem for that school. We've intentionally said we're not even going to be able to plan until after that happens. Doesn't that put those students at least potentially at a risk that we could have had a plan to respond to if we delay that? That's where I struggle with the delaying that part of it. I get the flux piece. We've been spending a lot of time on this because we didn't have a plan. If we build one, when something happens, we can respond.
But my concern is that if we spend the time building that plan as opposed to forming a board subcommittee to support David with regard to seeking funds for mitigation and seeking funds to do a proper health study and all of that, we don't have unlimited capacity to do both of those things right now. We've shown that because we haven't really moved forward too far on the mitigation piece or on the health survey piece. And I really would rather put my energy there if we have to make a choice in terms of seeing what we can do to support that school as opposed to focusing on what we need to do to close that school.
Yeah, and I guess what I haven't heard is that we have to make a choice because we haven't talked about the how to get to this. I appreciate that there's some interest in assurance of, status quo over a period of time. The reservation I have with that is exactly what you're saying, Patrick, and what you've said, Martin, which is and Bridget, to one of your comments, is I'm not sure that, saying stability, a commitment to the 3 existing elementary schools is going to generate, particular home buying interest in the Chamberlain area when the F-35 discussion and the airport expansion and buyout program exist anyway. So that's information a potential home buyer is going to have regardless. So my intuition tells me that we're talking about a fairly extended period of time, but to commit to it, and the reason I've focused more on having a plan is just the readiness for that option should the monitoring, which includes all of the elements that people have identified already, should those come to bear in terms of the quality of education we're providing. So I kind of get the dilemma. I haven't felt that we're at the point where we're having to choose how to prioritize allocation of resources to focus on these yet, because I don't know what options there might be available. I do understand the capacity issue, though, so maybe you're by deferral saying or some others are saying that's an issue.
So one additional thought, just from what you were saying, Elizabeth, is that if somebody is looking to move into our community and is considering the neighborhood with Chamberlain and understands the F-35s are going to be coming, I think there would be more comfort for such a family moving there if they understand that we're monitoring and we have a plan in case it becomes unworkable at Chamberlain. And one can see that, if it ends up that Chamberlain, the noise is causing problems, we have mapped out what we're going to do. So in fact, that may provide comfort.
Yeah.
So
would anybody suggest let's take it in pieces, a timeline for the plan building?
Are you going to weigh in?
I'm in line with that. Sorry, I thought I had weighed in.
Oh, okay.
Apologize.
Thanks.
Yeah, I know you may want that.
Let me just finish the conversation with the board, and then we'll take some questions. Before we do any voting, I'll take questions. Any thoughts on timelines at this point?
Well, can I clarify something? We really can't act on this tonight.
It's not warned for action.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's that.
Get some direction. You can get some direction and do some clarity around what you might be putting on for an upcoming meeting in
Fair
action.
enough. So my question stands, even though it's not for action. Is there any thoughts on timeline? Because I think even if we just state that we have an idea where we're going to go, that helps people understand what our plans are.
I would like to see from the administration, given the other priorities that are out there, how this would fit in. I mean,
to their workload?
Yeah.
So I'd be more bold. I would suggest that we should have a plan in place within 12 months.
A plan for a plan or an actual plan?
An actual plan.
We should have a goal of having a plan for all the things that Elizabeth talked about on the shelf within 12 months.
I like it.
So what does that then mean? I'm asking a clarifying question.
We'll tell you what that means for work for you later.
No, and communication, right? So the parent that moves in, where you going, questions, how are those responses? So we're going to develop a plan. It's going to will be developed not later than 12 months. In the meantime, budget planning, forecasting, how do I go about that?
Well, and to be clear, a plan for consolidation leaves open the question of which consolidation we're talking about. Are we specifically talking about a strategic plan with regard to Chamberlain? Or are we sort of leaving hanging out there overarching consolidation, a strategic plan for that? Because those are two entirely different plans. A strategic plan about how we would integrate Chamberlain students into the other schools if the F-35 were to cause an issue or other things that we're monitoring cause an issue is something entirely different than a strategic plan for broad consolidation that could still lead to option 4 or 5.
I have a somewhat response. So my thoughts on that plan would be based on the things that we are as a board, have discussed that might be factors in any of our schools, we would have a plan to react to those relatively quickly if any of them came to fruition. So if something on Market Street was happening and it made us really uncomfortable that our kids were going down in that school, we would have a plan to respond to that. If something happened at Chamberlain that we weren't happy with, we'd have a plan to know what to do with that. So it's really, to me, it's a set of contingency plans based on environmental factors that are making it to the point where we actually have to react. So not to necessarily predict that, but to have a plan in place.
But could the plan be for the next X number of years, we're going to function in the configurations that we are today, and developing a plan that will be, I mean, I think there needs to be some, so we can't have everything in flux all the time. So it would seem to me, I'm just.
Well, I think by definition, if you're not even going to have a plan together for 12 months.
Right, so I think you could be clear that
even if you wanted to trigger the plan the next day,
so you're
still
3 years
talking
out.
a couple of 3 years before you do anything.
So I think that statement would be of.
I think just from a practical perspective.
Importance to say, we know that, X years, and during that, we will have a plan, and these will be the trigger points or the watch points that we're going to kind of keep track of. I mean, I think that's the monitor component.
Yeah, I mean,
The questions are building up.
My worry, my worry is if we don't have it clearly defined, then every year I'm gonna be going through like an I wonder, how am I gonna respond? So
A couple more board discussions.
Yeah, I think we look at the most definitive challenge that we may have facing us. So we narrow the scope of what we're asking the administration to do right now, given all the other initiatives going on, and that would be if the F-35s come, if we find out through establishing a baseline health and education outcome of our elementary schools, including Chamberlain, and when the F-35s arrive in 2019, that we find that this is adversely affecting that and we have to move, how are we going to deal with moving the Chamberlain kids?
Yeah.
And that, in my mind, would take looking at the capacity issue at Central and Orchard and looking at the 5th grade transition to the middle school. Yeah, I understand that maybe at some point we're going to see what happens in City Center, but that's not going to be in this shorter time frame. And I would like to narrow the task if we're going to have this planning done by the administration, given all the other things that need to be done.
I just don't think it's only the F-35 at Chamberlain. That's not the only issue that we would be watching.
Right. And that's why I'm saying, forgetting about what the outside environment may be, it's what are the outcomes, what are the health and education outcomes, and we can monitor those. And if the location, if it becomes clear the location or the physical space is no longer workable to get those education and health outcomes, that's what would trigger the plan.
Agreed.
I still feel, just from I'm balancing sort of the period of stability with just being forward thinking, and it, I really don't, I'm taking into consideration, as we did in each of our position statements, the majority of the task force recommendations as well as the administration's recommendations too. So looking at that and, given that it is through this process that some specific issues were identified at Chamberlain, I feel like not to develop a plan that looks at a unification or consolidation strategy with each of the schools just falls short of a directional trend. I totally agree that the information isn't compelling enough to make that recommendation short term, but I'm also looking at this process right now, and I'm thinking of future boards going through this, and I feel like it's always tough to balance your annual operating activities with a longer-term strategic vision. Everything we're talking about right now is a reactive plan. So based on the overriding principles I sort of thought about initially, it's really anticipating kind of a negative impact on existing facilities and the service of education we're delivering. My hope is that some of the monitoring we're going to be doing is looking at 21st century curriculum, some of the things you've talked about consistently, Bridget, so that may also support a different configuration potentially. But again, hasn't been compelling enough to warrant me supporting that short term.
To Martin's point, would you be supportive of a plan that, similar to what I said about 12 months to build the plan, that the immediate goal of building the plan was focused on the Chamberlain area and then a potential phase 2 of the plan to build out the rest of the consolidation?
I'd like to give that some thought, but I'm certainly, as I've said, I think this board's been pretty thoughtful about it, and this is just hard work to not compromise, what you believe may be best for kids and our educational system going forward. So I'll reserve that opinion, but certainly we'll support the will of the board.
Bridget, any other additional comments?
I think where I'm struggling is there's a difference to me in my mind, a very big difference between a contingency plan to take care of something that might happen versus a strategic plan. A strategic plan says to me, as an organization, this is where we're going, and this is where we want to go. Right. And that's why I'm really just tripped up on strategic plan and strategic vision that includes consolidation, because I don't believe that it's not visionary to say we envision a community with our 3 schools and improving those 3 schools along with significant improvements at the high school and middle school to make them the best they can be. A contingency plan is a different thing and makes sense. I can probably be persuaded that a contingency plan for Chamberlain only is fine. I just can't get on board with the strategic plan for consolidation of all the elementary schools. That's just not the vision that I have for, and I haven't really heard a clear vision from the administration on what a consolidation would look like.
Thank you. They've been waiting patiently. Yes, sir.
The board has been really thoughtful about this issue. I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done. And I think the point about making a commitment to schools so that they can function highly is a really great point. I think the capacity point, though, is also really important. And my question, I guess, to you guys as a board. So, Elizabeth, you said, our mission as a board is to constantly evaluate. And I would say that's true, but it's to constantly evaluate the ends and the outcomes from an education standpoint. Over the last 2 years, what % of time have we spent board bandwidth on this consolidation issue versus programming and curriculum? And looking forward, what % of time do we want to spend now creating a contingency plan, continuing to evaluate consolidation versus programming and curriculum? We've got, and I'll bring up my first point from tonight. How much thought went into this homework thing? We're going to do away with homework for 4th and 5th graders entering middle school. How much board bandwidth went into that? Thought, you know what I mean? Relative to the amount of thought that's gone into this consolidation plan. And that's a minor example of the homework thing. It's important, though. It's a minor example. We've got personalized learning plans. We've got PBGRs. We've got 21st century learning. I would ask you the question, like, so you say 12 months, we should have this contingency plan. What is your view on what % of time has been submitted on consolidation versus programming over the last year and the future vision of what needs to happen over the next year to make sure that we're constantly providing the best education? What should that percentage look like?
Yeah, and I don't know how to answer your question on percentage, but I think we need to do all of it. Our responsibility is to make sure that we have a vision for our schools and that they're sustainable and that they serve our students. And I don't think we can just walk away from one because it's hard work or it takes us a lot of time. So I respect your opinion a lot on this. What you said resonates with me, but I don't feel like I can let this go either because I think we have a responsibility.
Can I just make a quick clarification? I just want to make clear that the board doesn't spend a bunch of time on programming, curriculum, or making decisions on homework. I mean, that's the administration. We're at the higher level. We want to make sure that they're doing that, but I just, that's getting into the weeds more than we do. This is what we are supposed to be doing, is this bigger question stuff.
What are we monitoring to make sure that was the best education decision?
Right.
It's an ends question, which is a board
Yep.
Right, and we want to make sure that they are providing us that information, right?
Other questions, statements? Monica?
Couple, try to be brief, but you mentioned status quo, Elizabeth. I would ask, to Bridget's point, and even David, thank you. You said, you know, the mission, if I'm told that this is it, then I'm going to go out there and get that noise mitigation money. I mean, David's waiting to have the support, the community's waiting to have it. If I go into the voting booth and next month or next March I see another bond for another, if the TIF passes, if I see another bond for a library or whatever's coming next, and next to it is a bond for the school, I want to know that the money that's going into that is going to be great for the kids, and it's an investment into the community that's going to pay out. It's going to be there. It's not going to be like, whoop, yeah. But I don't want the kids missing out on an opportunity in the next 5 years. You know, let's not even bother asking the voters for that, because they do have all these other city bonds coming at them. So let's not look at investing more in STEM right now, because we might change everything. You know, I want that money to be asked of me, and I want to know that it's going to be spent in the schools productively. So it's not, I hope that status quo is not what you're thinking, and that you're thinking continue to just make everything awesome. And the other thing I would just say, just as maybe a check for yourself, when you're thinking about the strategic idea of the roadmap to move to consolidation or not, there's a really big piece of that, which is, where would this one big school go? I mean, the reality is there's only so much space in the city. And where that, if that may be there today, it may not be there in 5 years.
Right.
And the location of it in itself can cause an entirely new plan to have to be created. So is it a good use of your time to develop a fully detailed plan? Is it instead a list of, it may sound reactionary, but a list of what are all of the what ifs we need to be prepared for? What if this happens at Chamberlain? What if this happens at the middle school? What are those what ifs that you can be prepared for? Because there are some things in terms of your detailed vision plan you can't know in 5 to 10 years, unless you're going to go out and acquire a big piece of land somewhere and protect it with green space and parks. In the meantime, that might make people happy. That make sense? Kind of.
I just can't imagine spending 12 more months thinking about these plans. And for once, I really do agree with you, David. And I think he's right. Like, the trust deposits they're gone. I have about 0 right now. Just say you like your 3 schools. You want these 3 elementary schools. That's what the community's been telling you. That's what we keep saying, and we're loud and we want it, but that's what we want. I'm not going to tell my friends to move here and say, oh, come here. Your school's going to be gone, and we're going to go to a tiny little plot in 5 to 10 years. Like, the trust deposits and the flux are going to make us feel uncomfortable. Like, the PTO has so little involvement now because people don't know. I don't want to give to the playground. I don't want to give to these things because I don't know if they're going to be there. So at some point, you just have to invest in what we do have. And if something does happen with the F-35s, we do have the space at the other 2 elementary schools to figure that out. And then we could deal with that for a year, and then we could make a plan. But for now, we don't need to spend 12 more months thinking of a plan and losing out on really great families and a lot of volunteers that do want to be involved because they don't want to invest in their kids' education.
Thank you. Abby?
I'm right there with David tonight. I really appreciate what he said. Like, with the 6 to 8 year plan, there is flux going on in our schools, and we need sort of that commitment so we can take action for our current generation, of which my kids are part of. And I do feel like the flux has negatively impacted them. And you might not think that's going to happen, but I feel it anecdotally. But that's all we've got right now. And I think, you know, I appreciate the thought that's gone into this, and we've been thinking about it for a long time. But at some point, we need you to be the leaders in the vision for us. And we can say we always need to be thinking about it, but at some point we need to say, here is our vision, and here we're putting the stake in the ground. And now it's really important because we have this TIF vote next week. And I think that the city's done everything they can to say, you know what? we've got the space there for you. You know, they've been really great about putting it there. And I'm thinking about, you know, if I'm going to vote on the TIF next week, and I see this vision that Central School could become a walking and biking school. It sends a message to potential developers, you know, like, this is a city that wants a school in the middle of its city center. That's a huge message. If we were to put a time frame that says, you know what, the Market Street development could be a disaster, and in 12 months we need a plan to back out of it, that sends a very different message to potential developers of, well, it's not closed, we're not really sure, you know, we'll see what happens, we're doing something else. So, you know, I appreciate the thought, and I totally agree, we need to be reactive with contingencies for the knowns and the unknowns. But we sort of need that vision so that we stop being in flux. And now's a really good time, because this is a really big time for our whole city.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Padma Larkin. I'm a member of the City Council, and it's nice to see that the school board is struggling for a long time with this, as we struggle with everything on our side of the street, as we call it. In going out and walking around the neighborhood, and we live in the Chamberlain neighborhood, and in talking with folks, people are concerned. They want to know what's going to happen, and if we had a magic answer to tell them, it would be terrific, but we don't. We know what we have now with the F-16s. We can anticipate some changes. I'm on the airport commission as well. When the F-35s, if they do arrive, and what that will mean. And we've been told that the 65 DNL lines may move in and be extended Long Road, Romanewski, and Williston. But right now that's hypothetical. We don't know. So I see that you're sitting here and struggling in trying to do something, and I thought, if I sat back and looked, and if I had young children that were going to school at this time, I'd like to have some assurance that the school not only was a great school, which I was so pleased to hear some of the wonderful things tonight, but that there's a plan if it doesn't become so great. And I guess my question would be, maybe it's in the definition of plan. You know, a plan, it sounds like we've heard terms roadmap or, you know, just definitive, strategic, or whatever. And I guess I would turn and say to you, David, if we were sitting here tonight and it was 2019 and the F-35s proved to be something that was not good for the children, that the sound mitigation program that the FAA, we believe, will have available for us would not be eligible to help mitigate noise at the school. In other words, if the 65 DNL line moved, what period of time would we, as parents of those children, what period of time are we looking at before something could be put into action and those children moved?
How long would it be from the time that you reach that definition and you start planning to deal with that school, i.e. assuming it's not going to be there, we can't mitigate it, then having a time period till when we can go through and move these children into a different facility?
I think those are good questions, and I think what the board is, you know, currently struggling with is to have a more defined plan on if those things if those occur. My point again, I've been clear about what I think is the right option. That said, I think it's also important that there's some, you know, time frame that's delineated so I can go forward with my staff and teachers and administrators to proactively plan for the trigger points that I know are currently in play, enrollment and sound, and do the things that I need to do through resourcing and budget and maintaining facilities to make sure that I create some stability. But when and if those things happen, if our noise mitigation measures, let's go forward to the 2019, aren't good enough, and it's extremely disruptive, and enrollments continue to suffer, then we push the button on a more already kind of very ready to go plan that pushes the button that triggers some of those things. So I think from my perspective, that would be very helpful for me. I feel if we don't have some definitive timeframes, then I'm always in the should I or shouldn't I? You know, it's need to, not sure. And again, I have to be most sensitive to the needs of the students and making sure that I'm equipping them with good service. Again, I go back to what I said before. We don't have, again, I don't want to say we're perfect. We don't have a high level of dissatisfaction. We've resourced our schools, our board, our community have supported that really, really well. My desire is never to get into a trouble bucket. I don't ever want to see a situation where we're having outcomes that are different from one school to the next. Then I think you're looking at me saying, I don't think you staffed, I don't think you resourced, I don't think you planned appropriately. That's in my bucket and my staff. I want to make that happen. That said, at what the community can afford, if that's amping up so much that we can't pass a budget, then that's a whole different issue, too.
I guess my point that I'm getting at is that, you know, it's about a 2-year period to take and physically build a school. It's probably a year to a year and a half to go through and plan what we're going to take and build. And in the meantime, we're going to learn a great deal. We're going to take and have studies that are going to take and be done and help us better understand the mitigation of, you know, circumstances in the whole in the Chamberlain neighborhood. And so we're going to be learning a lot of things, and this is part of what you think what you're trying to say about monitoring and paying attention to what's going on. So some of these things, some of these triggering points, you know, are going to happen a little bit down the road, and in the meantime, we're going to take and have other kinds of studies being done that are going to give us better answers to take and help us formulate ideas and so on down the road.
And we do have, just to let you know, that the city has hired a noise mitigation expert in Boston, I believe, a woman, who will be coming in to help us on.
This is the second part of the grant, right, Pat? The second part of the sound mitigation, the one that we got approved?
It's not the airport. It's not the airport.
It's a different
sound
one?
mitigation
I'm not
piece.
aware of that.
This is cities that we are going to have, and she will be in on November 14th at our meeting, when we'll have Gene Richards and the Director of Operations from the airport will be there. You know, God bless you. I think you've done an outstanding job, all of you, and it's such a difficult thing. But I certainly, at some point in time, would love to be able to say, if someone asks me that question, how do I feel comfortable, you know, living in that neighborhood, or, you know, moving into the neighborhood, to say, the city school board has turned around and they know the direction that they will go in if, in fact, there are items that would harm the health, well-being, or whatever for the children. Not just for the F-35s, to your point, Julie, and whatever. And, you know, I don't want this to be something that is so all-consuming, because I think you have other issues like we do. We want to get by the vote next week and all. And I have to say that I felt that we have been constrained on the city side, my opinion, not the whole council, because of the school issue. That, you know, it gets tied in, even though it's totally separate. I see Market Street, you know, I see a school there for as long as it's the decision of the city to have it, you know, and that's fine. The Chamberlain, I have a few more questions on, so I'd love to at least have some type, maybe not a full-blown, but a blueprint of something, or the what-ifs, Monica, as you mentioned, to know that if this came up, what would be the time horizon and what could you do?
Okay, thanks. So we don't have this warned for action tonight, so that we can't take formal action, but let me, and I think we need a little more discussion on this, so I don't mean to cut that off, but I also want to be thoughtful about, let me just ask this question. Does this board feel like there is any scenario that we will be taking action in any form of consolidation between now and 6 months from now? Not as a vote, but as a straw poll. Because I think one of the questions I'm getting a lot is creating some sense of stability for the community about where we are right now. And my sense is the board, even if they saw something, wouldn't be taking action anytime soon. So I'm trying to just state that.
Sale of a property, for
Yeah.
instance? Something that would go to voters?
Something that would actually be a material change to our schools.
I can't envision that. I can't either.
Well, me neither.
Okay.
But I guess I would, for clarity, for folks who are voting for the TIF bond and such, I mean, I'd take a straw poll as far as, if it ends up that we have to move Chamberlain at some point, is the idea that we would be consolidating, into the 2 schools that we currently have right now. In other words, what is the level of risk regarding Central School, given the facts that we have and given even what we can foresee? Because right now what we're foreseeing is city center development that will be multi-use, that will be residential, and that could lead to this school being a neighborhood school. Now, I, for one, do not see that we're going to be closing Central School unless there's a significant change in circumstances that I see out there. At least that's where I am. And that if Chamberlain is going to have to be closed, that the first alternative to look very seriously at would be Central and Orchard. So, to the extent that we're able, to explain that that's where we are, and I don't know if we can, but I just want to put that out there. That's where I am, certainly.
Anybody else want to comment on that statement?
I would agree with that. I mean, that's where I am, that I'm comfortable potentially talking about a contingency plan, not a strategic plan, to mitigate anything that we see happening at Chamberlain. But until city center is much more built out, I just don't think there's any reason to look at Central closing. So that's why I said earlier, I think I would be comfortable taking a straw poll on whether we cut off option 4 and 5 for the foreseeable future.
What's the foreseeable future?
Yeah.
I guess
Well, let's finish the straw poll on Martin's comment before we start the next straw poll. Bridget's comment.
I didn't know if he meant indefinitely or for a time horizon.
There's nothing on the time horizon that would tell me. A time horizon I would see is the 5-year period through which we're going to really understand what's going to happen at City Center. Because if I'm right, that's the time period which with any bond votes would have to occur. I'm looking at Pat, and she's nodding her head.
We do want it to move ahead expediently
Right.
because it means more revenue.
Yes.
Right. Yep. But in 5 years, we will know whatever is going to be done, presumably, largely, at least as far as the infrastructure that the city can pay for through a TIF.
You have a thought, Julie, or?
What am I commenting on? Sorry.
Basically, Martin saying that he doesn't, would the board feel comfortable stating that they wouldn't see changes at Rick Marcotte within the next 5 years, is, I think, the general statement he made.
So changes to Rick Marcotte would include the possible consolidation of Chamberlain students into that?
No, yes. I mean, I think if Chamberlain were to
that's a possibility.
that could be, but not a
that's
sale of Rick Marcotte, I think, is what he's probably more blatantly suggesting.
Correct.
I think I can agree to that.
Patrick?
I think the board would end up in that place.
It does seem to be 3 to 5, 3 to 2.
I continue to be unconvinced by the people that do not agree with me that consolidation doesn't make a lot of sense, but I know I'm in the minority, so.
Yeah, and I mean, I will weigh in. I do feel like as long as there's not an unlimited time horizon, I do believe the 5-year time horizon is realistic.
Okay. Did you want to redo your straw poll, or which was slightly different? Are you good for now?
I guess I could reword the straw poll. I mean, essentially cutting off option 4 and 5, it means that Central School would be where it is. I mean, that's essentially what we're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so are we in a position where we feel like we could take action on this the next time we meet? We've discussed possible actions, and I know we don't have consensus, but it sounded like
I would like to maybe propose revising what I initially, what initially led to this very lengthy discussion, to incorporate feedback and then distributing it through David to the board.
Yep.
For additional thoughts. And I get the sense we could take action.
Well, we'll warn it for action.
Yep.
And we'll take action, whether we pass it or not, is a whole different question.
In this last round, what I didn't hear and what would be great to hear from you guys is, in the meantime, it is worth investing in schools to not just be status quo,
Yeah.
but if there is something we could be doing in individual schools to make things better, it's worth it for taxpayers to want to support that.
Yeah, if I can clarify that, Monica, my definition of status quo is doing what we always do, which is we invest as appropriate.
Reiterate what we are allowed to tell other people. So no.
Anything you just heard in public session, you can.
Straw poll, no foreseeable action on central school. Leaving in the next 5 years. A primary concern that's addressed right now that needs addressing is the Chamberlain School in relationship to noise and location. And that's the thing.
I think that's a fair, high-level statement. Anybody just?
But in the meantime, we will be hotly pursuing any noise mitigation we can to make Chamberlain perfect right now.
I didn't hear that.
That was not there.
David asked for the support to do that.
Well,
I agree that he did.
The board did, yeah, that was not there.
So we're not going to pursue noise mitigation.
I don't think
We're
we're
also
saying
not
that.
saying that. I said that too. I said we should support David.
We're gonna come back to that one.
But yes.
I mean, that's back on me, Monica, for putting forward a budget and planning that continues to ensure that the schools are ready and able to be a good learning locations.
Well, if the FAA is ready to hand out the check.
No, they're not ready. That's not the case. They're not,
Write a check, I'm gonna be there, let's grab it from the school.
That's not the case.
Yeah, I would like to make a comment. I mean, the notion of a straw poll versus taking action is very different in this environment. So I think the public has gotten some indication. Personally, as a board member, I think we've said what item we would or warn for action and that we're going to try to be prepared for action at our next meeting. So I am always cautious about sort of what gets reported that the board really didn't take action on. So you've heard it here, and you can translate it any way you want, but the reality is the board hasn't taken specific action.
I totally agree, which is why we're sort of reiterating what is said versus is not said, but the intention is we're voting on this on Tuesday, and because of a formality that you couldn't take action tonight, we got a very valuable piece of information from you based on the means we could take at tonight's meeting.
I tell people to look at RETN at about 1 hour and 15 minutes.
Any other discussion on this before we move on?
2 hours and 15 minutes.
Oh, is it 2 hours? 2 hours and 15 minutes. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness.
Staring at the clock. Developers and everyone else, if in these 5 years we all of a sudden have this robust community neighborhood built up around Central School, in year 6, Central isn't going to be necessarily pulled out.
Here's,
hold up a minute.
This was a straw poll by currently sitting board members.
Yeah,
it's not an
makeup
action,
of the board
and the next
will
board,
change in
people
that
that sit in these
time.
chairs may have a different opinion. So,
And the Cubs are leading 3-1 in the 4th inning, and I'm hoping to actually catch the last 2 innings. So,
all right, we're moving on to agenda item 9.
thank you.
Update on negotiations. We have an update on any negotiations.
We are going to start negotiating on Monday with the Teachers Association. We'll probably be going over ground rules and setting a schedule. We've been trying for quite some time to get on the agenda, get on the schedule, and we will be starting very soon. We do not have anything, I don't think, set up with staff. We're trying to get something set up with the staff possibly as early as next Thursday. I'm not sure if We may actually have it, we
It's
just need to
confusing
confirm.
because there was, Amity did send out a meeting, but I don't know if that meant that we were just supposed to hold that space.
Right,
In
that-
case
yeah,
we heard
yeah.
back from them, or whether that meant they had actually come back. I
So
would
we
assume-
may.
Yeah.
And if we do, we will be talking the same thing about negotiation schedule and ground rules.
And then I know for each bargaining unit, we reached out about the healthcare option that we discussed possibly adding. Have you heard back on those committees from either of those two groups yet?
Yes, we heard back from the Teachers Association, who said that they're not interested in reopening the contract for the first 6 months of 2017 to consider an alternative plan that we had proposed and that we've been talking about. We have not asked to put this on the agenda for the first meeting with the staff because we don't know if we have a first meeting yet. But when we do, we will propose it, but we anticipate probably the same answer.
Okay.
But we will try it, because I think there's lots to be gained if we can move some people to this alternative health insurance plan.
We also put it out to the SBAA, and I have not to date heard back, at least no word, David, but if you have.
I have not.
Okay.
Any other updates on negotiations? All right, that moves us to agenda item 10, review topics for the other paper. And I'll have a copy of them somewhere in this huge stack.
So is the next one coming out tomorrow?
Tomorrow, should be master planning visioning, which, yeah, all of you saw and were helpful in the comments. Thank you. Of course, it's out of date now. But that's okay.
That's a good point.
Such is the nature of our schedule.
So we have, I don't know if everybody has a copy of what we got sent around. We've got budget, negotiations, 21st century learning, technology in the classroom, PLPs, SBAC, ends monitoring, wellness, preschool initiatives, and redistricting. I know the other paper would like a schedule, but let's just target right now, since we're so far behind, as for the next article. And then we'll come back for the schedule.
So that's negotiations according to this list?
It can be anything we want. That was I'm not sure how that one actually got, but there's a next, but they can be.
I don't think that should be negotiations necessarily next time.
SBAC scores, since we got them tonight, might be a good one to talk about.
I think that would be good.
Mhm.
I think people will be excited to hear about this.
Any disagreement or other ideas?
What are we doing on this?
No, that sounds good.
Any volunteers? Bridget did the last one.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Stuart, when stuff was put out from the state, right, on SBAC results, was that
We have a press release out. I mean, all the parents have already received,
Yeah.
Yeah.
their individual student results. And Julie, if you want to talk to me,
We can meet, yeah.
I'll help you put something
Yeah, because the
together.
press releases and the letters that we put out, or AOE's press release,
We
our
put out a letter
statements.
to all the parents. They also got the results.
Yeah, we got them,
But
I
we
got them
can
to
go
you
into the
guys.
finer
before.
grain, which they don't get.
Okay.
Which is how the schools did as well.
Yep.
They only know how their own
Okay.
children did and the school as a whole.
I'll be in touch.
Okay, I want to do a time check. It's 9:30. We're technically an hour behind where the agenda says we should be. And I know this won't be appreciated, but we also have a superintendent who is ill,
Yeah.
who is sticking it out here. So let's be thoughtful about what we tackle next here, and if we want to push anything off, for your own sanity and for his health. So we've got executive limitations on for action tonight.
So can I just clarify? So, I put together, with some help, that ends monitoring matrix, which automatically somehow but it's not like the same as a report that has to be approved. I would like to suggest, I only made a few changes, that we see it again in like 4 months or something when there's really substantial change to it. I don't think we really need to continue to discuss, and if people have specific questions, why don't they just send them to me, and I'll make sure that they get, and that I think could move that forward.
So other things that you might want to see included?
Right.
That was the purpose of looking at it.
Evidence that you really see is lacking. Elizabeth's question about what are we doing now, you know, and then we would come back, you know, with a more up-to-date matrix, also including a lot of the work that we're doing this year that would then by that time been accomplished, which I now put as future because we haven't done it yet, but we will have done, you know, 4 months from now.
Right.
Well, I mean, what I would suggest is that that's a request, that's a proposal. I think you take it off, you can give feedback on, and we'll keep it back on next time. How would you like to move forward? You know, if you want to add to it, or you have some ideas or questions, let's do it that way. So that you're not having to do it right now when you're kind of tired and.
Yeah.
No, that's,
People agreeable to that?
Yeah, I don't know
That's when we bring it back.
I don't know waiting 4 months, but let's move it.
Well,
off of
or you
today.
can move up on
Yeah.
that monitoring
Yeah.
report earlier. We can
Right.
reschedule our monitoring report calendar.
Okay.
So let's move off that one.
Treatment of staff. People have a chance to review this and
Yeah. You want to take us through each of the policies, or do you want us to
let me just
jump
first
to the
ask, do people
question?
have questions about any particular piece?
Of course.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a lot of questions, yeah.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions.
I have one question. I have 2 questions. Sorry.
All right, let's start with.
Actually, I have 3.
Let's start with detail. Let's start with detail policy number 1.
Both have a lot.
Yes, yes, and yes. That's my.
Really?
People have questions. Anybody have questions?
Oh, just questions now. We're not going to see if we have.
Oh, you want to jump to yes, yes, yes?
Well, if we're, we'll be efficient.
We can jump to yes, yes, yes. That's good.
But unless there's a question.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you this question. Do we have questions that we need to answer in order to help you answer whether we have yes, yes, and yes? Or do we have questions of curiosity and clarity? Or do we know the answer to whether or not the interpretation makes sense and we have data and it's in compliance? So that's the real goal.
Yeah.
Tricky question.
Well, it's not meant to be a tricky question.
For example,
if you don't know the answer to those 3 questions, then we should ask those.
Yeah, I mean, for example, my first question was on detail policy 1. This is just an example of some of the questions. I was confused because this seemed to imply that there were 3 reported incidents of discrimination against staff members that somehow relate to detail policy 2, which is specifically discrimination for non-disruptive expression of dissent. And I know we've dealt with some harassment issues, like other types of harassment issues, but do we really have 3 that were related to dissent of some sort? Or I guess I just didn't, that 3 would imply that there's something going on that I didn't understand was going on. Or was this just reporting of harassment in general?
Yeah, and my question on that one was, is there a need for additional training than we're already doing as a result of those 3 incidents?
Yeah, that evidence seems to be in the wrong place.
Right, that's where I was confused. But then my question was, as I flipped through, where would that kind of evidence go? And to Julie's point, you know, if I just didn't see like a general place where, you know, harassment incidents or that kind of stuff would pop up, other than here, which is why it kind of makes sense it's here, but it doesn't actually relate directly to the title of this
Well,
detail
it
policy.
would be in policy 1, I think, where it's protect against wrongful conditions.
No, I think that one, though,
It's more rule-driven.
is rule-driven. I think it would be actually in detail policy 5 is the closest it would fit. That's the fail to create a positive organizational climate conducive to achievement of the ends, and that, I think that fits in there pretty well. It's further evidence, I think, that we're doing a good job on that one.
So are there other questions on detail policy 1?
Nope.
Or 2, because that was kind of more of a 2.
That was 2, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Anything on detail policy 3 then?
I was confused on detail policy 3 because it says a support staff handbook. Is it still being revised as it says here, or is that what's talked about in the chart under evidence for policy 1? So we've added in that transportation and nutritional services department handbooks have been developed. Is is that different than the support staff handbook that we're talking about?
Yes.
Here, it is, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, then I guess I don't have a question about that one.
Okay. Detail policy 4? Questions?
One question I had regarding the evidence was the second paragraph, all incidents which have occurred since the last reporting. I'm wondering if we should have more information about what incidents occurred without giving details. That I'd say all incidents which have occurred since the last reporting of this monitoring report have been handled according to crisis team planning procedures and process. I'd like to know if there were incidents and kind of generally what they were.
Does that help you know whether they were in compliance, he's in compliance or not?
Well,
out of those 3 questions we have to ask, which one does that help you with?
Yeah, allow staff to be unprepared to deal with emergency situations. They're provided with appropriate responses to the most likely emergencies. Responses are in writing.
See this?
I guess knowing whether, without the detail, I mean, I think knowing that.
So we're trying to show we're unprepared. So the detail policy allowing staff to be unprepared to deal with emergency situations, so.
Well, and you're saying, and yeah, it supports it. It says that, all the incidents that happened, we were prepared. But it would be a little bit better if you could say no incidents happened that we had to be prepared for, or a half dozen incidents occurred and we were prepared. I mean, I'm a
quantity.
Well,
I'm wondering, were there in fact incidents? I guess that would be the first question.
That's not what the policy, from my perspective, is asking. Is that you're asking that you want me to be prepared to respond to emergencies, and I'm interpreting that to be that staff are appropriately provided training and information about responding, and then I go in there and say I probably could have left that off. All incidents that have occurred. Maybe I didn't need to put that.
Well, no, I think that's helpful.
I'm just trying to
no, it's helpful, but I just want to know that when you say, well, it's probably a very easy question for all incidents which have occurred. Did incidents occur? That implies that incidents did occur, and I just am
like to have.
Well, I'm just confirming that. No, all I'm confirming is that incidents did occur. That implies that, but it's not definitive because this is just carried over from a previous time. So it's almost like a check on the administration that we need to actually know that we had incidents that we handled fine.
So it's the wording of that sentence, changing that could be possibly.
It could be incidents occurred and they were all handled properly. Yeah. I mean, that would be sufficient. I don't need to dig in more deeply.
Yep. Got you. I'm fine to change that.
No, well, I guess if you put that in there, were there incidents that occurred? Let me just ask.
We know there were incidents.
Okay, all right. Then that's fine for me. But I just, when we do.
What I don't want to get into is then having to keep track of every possible incident.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I just wanted confirmation because my concern is that the only thing that's changed from the previous year is in yellow. So I want to confirm that, all right, well, here's something that's carried over from the previous year, and I want to just, so anyway, fair enough. Moving on, sorry.
Any other questions on detail policy 4? Detail policy 5?
I had one quick question, I think. Did you go ahead, Bridget?
No, go ahead.
Mine's on the page 7 where there's the chart of comments. Are those from teachers and staff, those comments? Or is it?
Which comments are you referring to?
On the page 7, the chart is number of emails, category responses. Because this, if that's just most
of them are anonymous, so how would you know?
They're not categorized by any set.
But is this the general comment line that anybody in the public can use, or?
Correct.
Yes.
It just may or may not be evidence of treating the staff properly if we don't know if it's staff or teachers. It just doesn't seem to be relevant evidence.
So you'd like it removed?
Yeah, we have there's in the other policy, I don't remember off the top of my head, we have something about comments, am I not?
So it may be
remembering that
superfluous,
right?
but it doesn't, but you still feel like even if if it's there, it doesn't hurt the fact that he's got evidence?
Well, it would suggest, if it's here as evidence, that these are comments from teachers or staff.
Gotcha. And they could be, in theory.
We don't know.
We don't know.
I mean,
okay.
It's not.
I had a question on detail policy 5 about why the master planning and visioning paragraph was added as evidence in this section.
It's about being informed, you know. I've listed a lot of other things, surveys, you know, other components that in the past about keeping people informed and the avenues that we do. I mean, it's not.
Particularly the meetings held throughout the schools to include the teachers to give them an opportunity to chime in or hear what's going on.
And community, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that goes to climate.
Yeah.
Organizational climate.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably
But
things that
organizational climate, I guess my initial reaction was sort of this sort of limbo question. Is it creating a positive organizational climate, the master planning and visioning? I can see where you could say the master planning and visioning means that we're really looking forward thinking about, you know, what our school district is going to look like, and we're creating a positive vision through this process. That didn't really come.
I think him
more to the
having those meetings and updating the staff is
It's just a general communication.
It's more
general positive.
It's more about my in the reason that I've placed it there is because of the interpretation that staff feel informed and supported in the services. So it's not, it's just about that they're being informed. And I think that's one example. I recognize the sensitivity to master planning perhaps but it provided evidence to the fact that people are being informed, you know.
Yeah,
Well,
it just could have been clearer. I mean, it basically just reads like a general paragraph
So
about
could have
master planning
restated
and visioning with that kind of buried in it.
being informed about the conditions.
Well, you could also say feedback was solicited.
Yeah, could.
Okay. Any other questions on that detail policy? Number 6?
Yeah.
I just
go ahead.
Sorry, I just have the general comment, and I know this isn't going to change because I say it, but it's annoying to me that it's on a 4-year cycle. In what world, except for education, do people get evaluated only every 4 years? I mean, no other world.
You are on record.
Okay, thank you.
And I think actually that for new teachers, if I'm right,
2 years in a row.
It's 2 years. I guess I have a broader comment that I also want to put on the record. So the importance of the performance evaluation, and we actually added this detailed policy, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, if I recall right. But the importance of the performance evaluation, theoretically, the way that we pay our teachers is we have a grid structure where each year of experience, with some caveats as far as, you know, there's a couple places where they are held on step, but for each year they jump on a step, they get a raise because they've spent an additional year in the classroom. They also can get a raise for having additional education, getting a master's degree, for instance. But just talking about the experience component of this, that the theory behind that is that the teachers become better teachers. And the support for that theory is that there's performance evaluation that helps the teachers perform better. I mean, that's part of what we've learned the evaluation does. Or if the teacher is not performing, they can eventually be put on a performance plan and they are taken out of our workforce. So that the performance evaluations are very critical, I think, for the whole structure of how we use the grid system. And that's why this has gotten a lot of attention by the board, in my view. So we started in, I have even the date, in September of 2012. We started wanting to understand how well the performance evaluation system was working that is the foundation, one of the foundations of the grid system. And let me just actually clarify, because I'd pushed back from Patrick Burke at one point during the last 5 years. It's not that the raise for a particular year is tied directly to what the performance evaluation says. That's not that's not the way it works. But the theory is that our teachers are getting better, and the performance evaluation system is the way that we make sure that our teachers are in fact getting better, or the ones that need to leave. So in September, we tried to figure out how to audit this, and we finally got an audit, and we tried to figure out how to look at this, and I won't go into the details of the comings and goings on that, but we eventually had an outside audit which was completed in August of 2014. And we've been waiting for the recommendations to be put into place, and it talks a little bit about those here. And now it looks like we're not going to see the next rendition of the upgraded performance evaluation. I know there's some changes along the way, but there always seems to be that until next fall at some point. And this concerns me. I still have no idea how much confidence I should have in what is the foundation, in my view, of how I can go into negotiations and such and agree that this grid is the way this should work. And I just want to express that I think we need to have this done. I think that we need to understand that the performance evaluations are working, and so I said my piece.
Yeah, I also just want to add that the bottom paragraph on page 8, where it says, at the end of each school year, consider providing the board with the aggregated data for the schools. I thought that we decided we were going to do that already, and I don't think it was a discussion. Am I wrong? My colleagues, I'll put that out to you.
I think don't they have it here as far as on the page 9? Let's see. Yeah, this is the recommendation. I think they actually are providing.
And I missed it. Okay.
Yeah,
all
right here. So they are providing that, but it's the number. But we don't know that the recommendations have been put in place or what the next evaluation system is going to look like. So.
Sure.
Yeah. Actually, the reason we're looking at the Kim Marshall work is exactly what Julie just said. His work is about being there more often, not waiting 4 years, but really, creating a system that's more dynamic. And that's what the administrators, really were jazzed up about, after going and really just revising what we already did, trying to make it stronger, to really look at it better. So, sometimes these things take time, and I know people want to do it instantly, and we continue to run the system that we're running because that's the agreed upon system, just like an agreed upon contract. But we do want to change the system so it's not a 4-year system, and that people are not just going in 2 years to see, 2 times a year to see prearranged pieces, but to see more teaching on a regular and concurrent balance. So I know it feels like time, it is time, but it really is to make a system of evaluation that works so that everybody does feel that it's helpful to them as teachers, and it's helpful to us as administrators, and ultimately to you all as the people who have to oversee it.
Yeah, and I mean, to express my frustrations a little bit more, Marshall's book has been out since 1999. I've owned it for 5 years because when we started going into this. So, it's like it seems like there's been always something with respect to this particular issue that I've been looking into or trying to figure out for 5 years. And I'm just frustrated by it. That's all.
I don't blame you. We have a system in place. It's part of the collective bargaining process that's delineated on the evaluation. Part of our work with you is to try to make sure we are paying attention to the collective bargaining specifics, but at the same time providing you good information around where we would go next. At the same time, we have an obligation to provide feedback and evaluation. I can tell you that we've held people on step. That's an opportunity that we have. People have been let go. We have many people that have been put on focus plans of assistance and that have gotten better. It's because of again, the recommendations and the ongoing work that we've been doing that I think we are making significant inroads. Now, you aren't there all the time, and I understand that frustration. We can talk more about it as we move forward. Evaluation, actually, feedback is really what we're looking at, which we know is most profound, more frequent and more ongoing, and the visits that need to happen are kind of the most critical components of effective evaluation. So it has been put, I mean, we have been at it, learning and asking. Again, 1999, I mean, we've had other iterations and other professional development that administrators have been doing. And we want something that's an effective model. We've done a lot of work on it. So
I just wondered if there was just no clarity about what the timeline was. I mean, it kind of implies
Oh, the
that you're going to
Sarah
take a whole year to read the book and then maybe next summer
no,
sometime actually do. It just would feel, it really felt like this was sort of being slowed
well,
down.
you're kind
on
of in the
purpose.
year now. I mean, we're in the year. It's one of the issues that we have. I would say my thing is, and we don't have this luxury. You know, and again, some of you are business oriented. When you create change systems, you have people that come in and help with project development and change systems. I mean, our ship's moving all the time, and it's not easy for me to develop capacity. And I get your frustration, but it's about capacity to continue to do the things while the ship's moving, and to then make the change.
Yeah, but that's why we brought Sarah Denny in
Oh,
to
no,
make
but
specific recommendations.
But Sarah
about what
Denny,
they-
remember, it's easy to provide a recommendation, just like for a business to change the path. It's a different thing, you know, project development teams and, you know, come in and say, we got to do this, we got a timeline. And so we're in that, and I'm being very transparent. And again, I'm saying policy violation here.
Right.
And perhaps I need to
Well, I'm just wondering,
add
do we
more
need to get you some
resources or figure out
support?
how to do that, you know?
Yeah. We need to give you extra
Or
support
I
to do
need
that, 'cause
to
it's
pull an
pretty
administrator
important.
out so I can get more, you know, it's hard by that. And that's been one of my biggest frustrations is it's hard to get the needed time. We struggle with getting, our administrators want more professional development time, you know. We want more with teachers. We struggle, our teacher learning Wednesdays, hard. Teachers are loving them, but it's hard. We don't have enough time. So, you know, we also need to be smart around prioritizing. But today, you know, we might want to put this one at number one. We got to stay the course. This is part of our work that we've been really, I think, quite successful looking at our long-range plan. MTSS is that's great. We got to do this. And evaluation is a big, big component to do well. People need feedback in order to make improvement. We know that.
And part of the, we go out in the community and we support how we're compensating our teachers, and I am in support of that, but I want to have the backup for it. So maybe it's a somewhat different question. I mean, I want to have the comfort that my whole construct, when I tell people that, yeah, they are getting a raise because they've been here for another year and more education, but here's why that works and here's why we can do it this way. And it also kind of pushes off against, although it seems to be less of a pressure now across the country going to merit pay and the difficulties of that, and I've felt 5 years ago when we started this conversation, it was kind of a pushback against those considerations that we should be doing this merit pay, which I understood was very hard. So it was, well, how do we tell the story and justify the grid that we have now? And maybe it's a matter of somehow, you know, seeing how else we can have that level of confidence that this performance evaluation system is working. But we'll continue that conversation. See what score of the game is now. 5-1, Cubs are up in the 5th inning, so.
All right, so the overall policy?
I am suffering right now. I am suffering.
The overall policy wording, interpretation and evidence. Any questions on that one?
No.
All right, so we've given some
Feedback.
comments back to David, so this will have to come back. It is almost 10 o'clock. Is it your choice to continue along?
No.
Do we need to do 2-4 just to stay on track for our budget and all that, or no?
I think, yeah, because I thought it said in the budget timeline we're supposed to be doing 2.5 tonight.
Yeah, we're a little behind.
Well, what
And
could,
we're already behind
what
on the
could
budget.
happen, if you wanted to, is a couple board members could provide a more closer look and give feedback to myself and John within the report out so we could move forward. But, I mean, I'm okay.
So we do provide questions on other things to you via email, and then you answer them.
To do the same with that.
If people want to try to do that with 2-4 and 2-5, and then we could maybe get through them
We don't have
quickly.
2-5.
our next meeting?
We only have 2-4.
don't have
Oh,
2-4.
yeah, but have it for 2-5.
All right.
So can I just bring up one issue on this, since I'm not going to be at the next
On
meeting?
2-4?
On 2-4?
Can you just bring it up in email?
No, I think I just want this one for the board to
So,
weigh in on.
so the board is okay with doing the process I just suggested, with the exception of Martin's question?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's just one question. It's with respect to detail policy 9, fail to aggressively pursue receivables after a reasonable grace period. And the conclusion is that it reports policy violation. I actually think that what you have in there for your plan and such is evidence that, in fact, you're complying with this, because the policy and your interpretation suggests that you're going to be really trying hard to get that money, not that you're going to be able to collect every penny.
Yep.
So I would suggest when you look at that, I really thought that what you laid out in the evidence, as well as your compliance plan, is all evidence that in fact you're complying with that particular policy.
I
So I
agree
wanted
with
to
your
throw
point.
that out to you. So if you're bringing this back again, that
You just, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay, we will bring this back on the next agenda, and you're not going to be at the next,
correct.
So then we got, we said we don't have 2-5, but I have it on my agenda.
It was taken off on this, on the one that went out.
Oh,
2-5.
sorry. Yep, I'm using it.
Just because I
Did you have
knew
ends
exactly where we,
Okay, so ends monitoring. How does this affect the ends?
yeah,
We have something on that?
it was just added in there as a conversation, I think, when he put it on there.
We have conversation, so there's a document on that. Do we have, that's a standing document as well. We want to, have any comments on that document? I can't even locate it now.
I got my mess going.
Oh, there it is.
It was just this one little piece of paper.
Oh, I saw it, yeah.
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 So this is just largely a reminder. I got it.
Yep.
Largely a reminder. Does anybody have any questions on this item?
No.
Okay. SBAC results report?
You know, we can, maybe we should just answer questions that you have.
The only suggestion I have is it would be nice to see comparisons, not just with other Vermont schools, but now that we have SBAC and there are many states, is compare to some of the other high-performance states as well, see how we stack up beyond just Vermont.
Well, we can show the state data. It's harder. I did do some
Disaggregation,
last year, some, like trying to, like towns in Connecticut, for example, which are SBAC towns, trying to find, more or less the
Similar
same
size.
the same income level. And I think I did a little of that. I certainly can do it again. I mean, that data is all out there if you want comparison data.
The hard thing
It's
is how
still-
far you want to go, and maybe some of you may want to say, well, pick a few spots. Well, we can tell you what the SBAC schools are. I mean, I don't want you to think we're just cherry picking this one, and this one, and this one, but,
No.
And I want you to know, that based on the data which has been corrected, South Burlington High School on Vermont Digger hasn't been corrected on Digger yet, is number 2 in the state. But actually with the corrected data, which came out after the 23rd, we're number 1. But it's not on Digger yet.
David, I had a question for you because we touched on this briefly when the results very first came out, and we were all very excited about them. And you said that you had some concerns, though, with regard to some subgroups. And I just didn't know if you could point out to me where you were concerned. You said there were some subgroup things that you didn't like.
yeah, I mean, I think this is a big part of, what we're trying to do is around, certainly around diversity, equity, and inclusion, looking at all of our different groups, looking at our SES population, looking at special education. Those are all areas that, where we can say, hey, we're doing well, but how are we doing for all kids in all subgroups? And in some cases, when we have small enough subgroups, it's it doesn't even get reported because the n sizes are so small. And so, those are my concerns, and some of that you'll see in action items coming out of the next budget on how I'm going to deal with these subgroups. And this is a concerted effort by, myself and my administrators to say, how are we doing? And there's many different components of that. I don't know. Do you want to add anything, Stuart?
Well, you can look at some of the poverty data and you can see it's certainly not what we want it to be. And it's also important to think about, even though it is reported out in that way, often somebody doesn't just fit into one category. In other words, kids in poverty but who are not on special ed might actually be doing better, but they're still all in the whole group, kids in poverty. So we're also trying to break it down in terms of what's the real problem. Is it a poverty issue, which it could be? Is it about EL, English language acquisition? Because they cross over those groups. Only the English language people are in the EL group, but in the poverty group, 4 or 5 different kinds of subcategories.
Yeah, cohort math, reading.
That cohort of subcategories. So we're really trying
we've been disaggregating some of this.
Finer and finer to see. But
was there anything
we want
that's
a place where all our kids, there's no gap. And there are schools in the state that have really narrowed their gap. We've started to do it, but it's still not consistent enough.
I guess my question, I would direct the same question to you since you're so involved in this, is what popped out for you and what were your concerns or what were your, highlights? Just not,
well,
giving
some of the things that I just thought were really interesting is, for example, you look at elementary, that almost in every category, like one class in one subject in one school didn't do as well as you would think. So you look and sometimes the scores are exactly in that 70–80%, and all of a sudden there's a 64 for one cohort in one school that didn't translate across that whole grade. That's using the same curriculum. What is that about? That's one question. And there's one group like that in a different test in each of our schools. Those are things that pop up.
I had a specific question around that because when you look at chart 7, the SBAC math results by gender, and not looking at Chamberlain, not because we've had a conversation about Chamberlain, just because that's the one that the data looks odd to me. 3rd, 4th, and 5th, those scores go down for females, and they go up for males. Any idea, any insights of what's going on there?
At this moment, no.
That's just intriguing.
Questions, and one of the things, everything is serendipitous. There's an article that actually just came out on a study, a new study on gender from early grades on. Piece that we're going to be sharing and using as part of it.
I think the important piece. You're getting an overview of data behind each grade, and this is Stuart's doing this work with Ray Mann, our data person. We're looking. The story is behind the whole cohort. How the cohort. You've heard us talk about data walls in math and literacy. How kids are progressing and what are we doing to ensure that trajectory is appropriate is a lot of the story. Again, this is a snapshot. This is an assessment that's used, that is new and different, but nonetheless, we're gonna use it as an important data point. But my big thing always has been, that's great. They're 89. Well, what if they were 90%, 95% the year before? Then you'd be concerned that, that's great at 89, but they were higher the year before. I kind of have a concern that they're becoming disengaged or not as whatever. So there's more to the story here that I always think, and we're giving you, again, this is SBAC result information, but there's a lot of data here that we have on every student that goes behind.
And is there the ability for us over time to look at this longitudinally by student and by the path they took through our schools?
Well, right. So the thing to remember is this was only the second time
assessment.
This assessment has been given. Next year, after the 3rd time, this coming year, there actually will be individual student data that they say will begin to become accurate in terms of seeing an individual student's projection. That's part of the computer system. So that's one piece. The other thing, though, is there is going to be a change. The state of Vermont, as part of ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, has a plan, and their plan is to take the test out of the 11th grade and put it into 9th grade. So that SBAC would actually run for all kids 3rd through 9th grade, and then 11th graders, they would look at what your level of ACT, SAT taking is,
Mm-hmm.
and results from them, you know, as part of what would be your high school's showing. But to try to take that out of also the 11th grade year, which, as you know, is a very heavy year, as is indeed our 8th grade year.
So, you know, some of the other things that I think are important is that, you know, so you see the score, but then you hear that the attendance of this particular child is at whatever. They've missed 15 days of school because of.
Yep.
You know, what about the activities in which they're engaged in?
Right.
Right?
That's why I was looking at from a
Yeah, so we have the data, and that's an important part of the story that I think is really critically important, right? And so those are the things, I mean, we want that richness in the database, not to just say we've done well, but to do the proactive steps, right? Proactive around, we know that kids, when they're on this level of trajectory, they're on the right path. If they're down here, we need to be doing things at the earliest possible age to engage them, create the environment that helps them be on that positive learning curve. So those are the, I mean, that's where we want to be. And again, we're getting there.
Yeah, just if you remember when we were at the pillar at the high school last year, and I showed you some of how we see the results by individual students, both by cut scores and by claims. There are 4 claims for language arts, reading, writing, listening, and research. There are 3 for math, you know, the actual math facts, problem solving, and expression. So, you know, we can look and see at that level whether if that's a bell curve kind of piece where here's the norm and they're either 1.5 above or 1.5 below. So we can look at all kids in that way. And there is more and more data coming out every year from this piece. Obviously, we're showing you, you know, the higher level snapshots. So that even the one thing we haven't gotten this year, and we're talking with the state, is we had a full slice file last year. So even like where you're not seeing the data reported on the poverty because it's identifiable, last year we had that data. This year we don't have it yet.
And we would like it.
And, you know, we can create it, which we have, for example, the 6th grade, but the state's not providing us with a spreadsheet to use. We have to then do the work ourselves. So it is a conversation that we're having with the state.
Thanks, Stuart.
Anything else on SBAC?
I guess last question, I promise. Kneecap science. What happened at the middle school? It went from 60% to 36%. Was there a change in the test? Because it changed over the course of 1 year from 60 to 39 between 2013 and 2015. Did something change in how we were teaching or the test, or is there just some change afoot?
Well, you know, we're changing, of course, because we're, you know, moving towards next-gen science standards, and we've been, you know, very proactive with that. You can also see that the whole state went down in the middle school. And, you know, one of the things about the middle school test, you know, and I don't know if there was a change when that big, where everybody went down and we were always the highest. We're still actually one of the highest. You know, I don't have the other results, but from what I've talked to Colchester and so on, our 36% is actually, even though it sounds horrible, is not as horrible as like everybody else is horrible, for whatever that's worth. But the 8th grade piece is the largest amount of content because they're basically taking everything that kids theoretically are learning 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and giving it to kids in May of 8th grade to do a test on right after they finished their SBACs last year. And this year, you know, we also have NAEP. So whether there's some test fatigue for our kids at that point, and 8th graders in general, is an interesting question. But 4th graders are really just doing 2 years of material, 3rd and 4th grade. And 11th graders, you know, it's that traditional, you know, everybody in the state more or less does earth science, you know, biology and chemistry, and the test kind of reflects that as well. So it's that middle school where the curriculum is a lot less defined statewide, a little test fatigue, but we're going to continue to look. One of the things is there will be theoretically a new test, not this coming, but the year after, that will be aligned with what we're doing with Next Gen. The last thing I'd say is that the Next Gen is much more grade specific in terms of than the actual state standards ever were. So so it'll be clear what sixth graders should be studying.
If you have other questions, these are great. I mean, I think if you have other questions, keep them coming to us, as we, report on student outcomes, so.
Want to move us right along to item 13, set the agenda for our next meeting.
Well, we wanted to add in specific language to the master planning and visioning piece, right?
We're going to have it, we'll warn that for action.
But we're going to add some specific language in there, right?
I wouldn't add it there.
No, not on the agenda.
Add an action item.
Yeah, we'll add it, but I mean, we're going to need something that.
We'll put a statement in about what the action's about. Yeah. I'll work with David. I'll work with you on it.
Yep.
Not the whole thing, but just
Right.
Well, just again, I think it's the transparency for people to know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other items for next week?
Well, I think we said that we were gonna, did we say we were gonna take up ends monitoring for next?
The first bullet under the.
Well, and maybe the last one, I don't.
Yeah,
are we taking
I had those
those?
both crossed up as well, I agree with you. Okay. That's that. Item 14, anything under future agenda items that people want to try to move forward? Going once?
I think we got enough.
Twice, sold. Any review of the October 5th and October 10th minutes? Any comments or adjustments?
Looks good.
Looks good to me.
They're approved by consensus. The consent agenda.
So you have a point 2 on here. This is not an addition. This is a result of filling an opening. And so this is actually a teacher, Tommy, who's new this year at Chamberlain at .8. But because of the opening here, applied to this position, and it will be a 1.0. So he's already .8, so the .2 makes him whole.
But wasn't the position here a full FTE?
It is so it turns it to a 1.0 because he's currently contracted 8.8.
Right, but my concern is he's .8 at Chamberlain still, right? And then .2.
He's going to be.
Oh, he's
so
moved.
He has the .8.
Okay.
He'll be here though, .8.
The district's paying him .8 already. They're just going to move where they're paying him.
So he'll be a 1.0, which is made up of a .8 that he was committed to. This other .2 will be a 1 year only because we'll re-advertise it.
Okay, I'm not getting my point across.
He's here full time.
I understand, but
Not yet.
the open position that you were filling here
Was a 1.0.
Right.
Correct.
And you're filling it with a .2.
Filling it with a 1.0. .8 that this individual's currently employed coming over from Chamberlain.
He's asking us to approve a .2 addition to what this guy's already a .8 for the district, somewhere else. He's moving it.
Are you going to come back to us with the .8? That's the question.
Nope, because he's already under contract .8.
So are you going to backfill him from his current position?
That's a posted position over at Chamberlain for .8.
I think what she was asking.
That's what I'm asking.
There you go.
Posted .8 over there.
Okay.
Oh.
That was hard.
So there's no incremental
Reflective
FTE.
of the time.
There's no incremental FTE.
But who's doing physical education at Chamberlain then if he's over here?
Well, he's not over here yet. There's a
Right.
transition plan. Once this gets approved, not yet, then there'll be a transition plan for him to come over and somebody to get hired. There'll probably be interim fills over there, like they've been doing here.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for
Any other
the-
questions on that one? Okay, that's approved by consent as well then. Copier upgrade? Any questions on the copier upgrade?
Looks good.
There are no questions. That is approved by consent as well. Accounts payable orders. It says 16 and 17, but I think it should be 16, 17, and 18, correct?
Yeah. Mine's 16, 17, 18.
Oh, yep, it got updated again. I used the wrong version. So we're all good. Any questions on accounts payable orders? Item 18, accounts payable order to Belkate School.
I move that we approve the accounts payable order check to Belkate School in the amount of $78,410.20.
Seconded.
Everybody wants to second that one? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
I move that we adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Have a good evening, everybody.